Good evening again.
aos
Welcome
demais
everybody
participantes que acabaram
to
de
the
entrar.
participants that have just joined us.
Estamos muito felizes
So we're
com a
very happy
participação de
indeed
vocês
to have you
nesse
all
evento de hoje.
participating in this evening's event, or today's event for people that
São
are in earlier time zones.
19h33. Eu
It's
acho que em respeito
7:33
àqueles que
p.m.
foram
in
super
Brazil.
pontuais,
So
eu sugiro que a
with
gente comece o nosso evento de
respect
hoje.
for
E com
people
isso
that
eu
were
queria
punctual, we're going to
efetivamente
begin
dar
our
as
event. So I want to
boas-vindas.
actually
Muito
welcome
boa
you
noite a
now officially.
todos.
So welcome everyone.
E é
And
prazer
it's a huge
acolhê-los
pleasure to
aqui
welcome you
nesse
all
evento
here
do dia de
in
hoje, no
this
dia
today's
16 de
event
abril de
on
2026, para a
April
gente celebrar
16,
o Dia Mundial
2026
da
to
Voz.
celebrate World
É um
Voice
evento
Day.
muito especial para a nossa
It's a special
comunidade
event for our
e não é à toa
community,
que nós temos
and it's no
convidados
coincidence that we have
muito especiais. Antes
distinguished
da gente
guest
começar,
speakers. Before we begin,
eu acho que é importante
I
lembrá-los
think it's
que é um evento
important
que
to
será
remind you
gravado.
that this
Então,
is going to be
nós damos aqui
recorded.
total
So
liberdade para aqueles que não se sentirem
you should feel
confortáveis para
free.
fecharem
If you're
suas
not
câmeras.
comfortable, you can turn your cameras
É
off.
um evento que vai ser
It's an
acompanhado
event
de
that's going to
interpretação simultânea
be
para
having
3
simultaneous
idiomas. Nós
interpretation into 3
temos nossos
languages. We have
intérpretes,
our interpreters who will be
colegas
translating
voluntários aqui do
or
francês, do
voluntarily
espanhol e do
translating into
inglês, que
French,
vão fazer
Spanish, and
trabalho
English that are
maravilhoso.
going to do
E a eles
wonderful
nós já
work, we're
deixamos
sure.
o nosso
And we
sincero
want
agradecimento aqui de
to
antemão.
thank them from the bottoms of our hearts
E
already.
nós hoje
And
também
today
temos
also
o
we
prazer
have
e a honra de contar
the honor
com
to
o
have
Peter
Peter
Laszlo,
from
da AIIC Central. O
AIIC
Peter é
Central Europe,
o
is
convidado
a special
especialíssimo por
guest and
várias
expert for various
razões, e
different
a
reasons.
mais
The most
importante
important
delas é
one
o
is the
fato dele
fact that
estar
he is
longe de
far
casa,
from home.
fora do fuso, já são
It's
1h30 da manhã para ele, e a
1:30
gente está muito
a.m.
grato,
where
Peter, por
he is.
você
We're
ter
extremely
se
grateful to you,
esforçado
Peter, for
tanto para
having
poder
made this effort
falar
to be able to
nesse
speak
nosso
in our
evento.
event.
Você vai
You're going to be
falar
speaking
algumas palavras
a few
introdutórias a
introductory words in
respeito,
just a
né,
few
do
minutes
trabalho que
concerning the work
o Science
that
da AIIC faz.
you do with the
Vou
Science Hub
apenas
in
fazer dar algumas
AIIC. I'm going to
informações
give
básicas
some
sobre o Peter,
basic
porque o
information on
currículo do
Peter
Peter é
because he
imenso.
has
A
a
gente
long
ficaria alguns
resume.
minutos
So it's
lendo
not even a
aqui,
resume. It's
se
so
a gente
long.
fosse descrever toda a formação
It would be
dele,
difficult to
mas
cover
o
your
mais
entire career,
importante
but the
é
most
que
important thing that
ele
he
é membro
is a member
da chamada
of the
não região da AIIC, né? São os
non-region.
países do
These
Sudeste
are the
Europa, que
countries
ainda não uma
which
região
don't have
estabelecida na AIIC,
official
mas
region
ele
under the
integra o
association,
grupo
but he's a member of the
chamado
group
Health
called Health
Workstream, que faz
Work
parte do
Stream, which
Science
is
Hub
part of the
da AIIC.
Science Hub at the
E
association.
desde
And he,
2024,
since
ele
2024,
integra, e no final de
he's a member,
2025,
and
ele
in late
foi eleito
2025,
como
he was
convener
elected
desse grupo. E em janeiro de
as the
2026,
convener of
ele
this group.
sucedeu
In 2026, he
a
succeeded
coordenadora, a
the
Irina
coordinator,
Paramanova, nessa
Irina
nova função, né,
Paramanova,
de
in this new
coordenação,
role
então, do
in
Science Hub.
coordinating the Science Hub
Portanto, é
in the association.
prazer
So
imenso tê-lo
it's a
aqui
huge
conosco.
pleasure
Também
to
do
have you here
Science
with
Hub,
us,
nós
Peter.
temos Natália
And
Tadei.
we have Natalia
Aqui, dá um
Tadei
oi aí para a gente
here.
rapidinho,
Tell us
Nath.
hello
Nós
quickly.
estamos muito
Natalia
felizes, fizemos
Tadei, we're
convite
extremely
especial
happy.
para
We
vocês estarem
gave
aqui
you
com
a
a gente
special
hoje,
invitation to be with us this
justamente
evening,
porque a gente
precisely
sabe o
are
valor que
aware of
a
the
AIIC dá e de todo o
value
trabalho
that
de pesquisa que tem
the
sido
association
desenvolvido nesse
assigns
campo.
to the
Então,
research that
algumas
is done in this
palavrinhas aqui
field.
a
So
respeito do
a
Peter, e
few
em seguida passo a
words
palavra para
concerning
ele.
Peter, after
O
which I'll turn the floor over to him. Peter,
ele
he
médico
is a
e
physician,
ele
an MD,
teve a
and
sua
he
formação
his
em
training
medicina,
in
seu diploma
medicine,
em
his diploma
2004,
is
recebeu o título de especialista
2004,
pelo
a
Colégio
specialist
Romeno
from the
de
Romanian
Cirurgiões
College of
em
Surgeons
2006.
in
Ele atua há
2026,
mais de 20 anos
and he's
como
been working more than
intérprete
20 years as an
freelancer
interpreter, a
credenciado
freelance interpreter,
junto a
accredited
várias
freelance
instituições
interpreter with
da
several
União
different
Europeia.
European
Ele
Union
atua
institution.
nas
He works
cabines
in the
de romeno
booths
e alemão.
in
Ele
Romanian
entrou
and
para a
German,
AIIC
and
em
he joined
2010
the
e
association
ele
in
se tornou membro
2010.
da Federação
He became
Alemã
a
de
member of the German
Intérpretes e
Federation of
Tradutores em
Interpreters and Translators
2012.
in 2012.
O Peter, ele
Peter,
é
he
romeno de
is
origem,
Romanian,
e ele nasceu numa
and
família de
he was born
músicos,
in a family of
e
musicians,
onde falavam-se, às
where
vezes, né,
they
durante
spoke
as
sometimes
refeições, mais de
during
4
meals
línguas.
more than 4
E ele
different
é falante
languages.
nativo do
Just
alemão,
think
do
of that.
húngaro e
And
do
he's
romeno,
a
mas
native
ele hoje
German and
vai falar
Hungarian and
conosco
Romanian
em
speaker, but he's going to be
inglês.
speaking to us
Então,
in
Peter, mais uma
English.
vez, muito
So, Peter,
obrigada
once
pela
again,
presença
thank you indeed
conosco,
for
e você está com a palavra.
participating and sharing your expertise with us, and you have the floor now.
Thank you, dear friends and dear colleagues, for having me and for this very elaborate introduction. I do not work as a physician with clinical practice since quite some time, so I consider myself a fully fledged interpreter today. But yes, I have and I keep interest in medicine and in health, and this is also why I got involved in the first place in AIIC's Science Hub, and within that in the health work stream. Thank you so much for inviting me to your event, which I'm certain will provide valuable insights into how voice works, the occupational risks involving the organs that form the voice, and definitely the best ways to care for this irreplaceable working tool for interpreters. I'll just allow me to share a few reflections on the importance of tonight's topic, because I think it is an important one for us, for interpreters. The voice has been known as the oldest instrument of expression among humans. So long before the first cave drawings, people communicated using the inflections of their voices. And the agility of the voice organum allows us to express knowledge and personality and emotion in countless nuances, each of them quite unique and precise. And one could even argue that vocal production and voice reception, as mediated by the larynx and both our ears, are essential gateways for knowledge transfer and for mutual understanding to this day. And why I'm saying this, because I think for interpreters, vocal training and voice care should be just as important as auditory health, since the way we sound to our clients is essential in their acceptance of the speaker's interpreted message. Unfortunately, voice training and voice coaching have long been confined to drama schools, to music conservatories. And this is why we are so deeply appreciative of your event and similar initiatives that help share these essentials of voice production and voice care. We have improved so much the technical conditions for recording and transmitting voice. Therefore, I think we should not leave behind the raw original that is produced by our vocal folds in a process which involves dozens of laryngeal, orofacial, and respiratory muscles, which are all precisely coordinated in what's maybe the most complex and rapid motor behavior of the human body. So I'm certain and very much looking forward to the keynote addresses by Dr. Glaucya Madazio and Dr. Luciano Neves, who will certainly highlight what interpreters and actually everyone could do and should do to sound clear, calm, and reassuring. And looking forward and beyond this 16th of April, which in the country where I am located now is already the 17th of April, we invite you to reach out to the Science Hub Health Workstream on all matters related to interpreter health, including voice health. As has been said, we're proud to have in our work stream, in our group, also Brazilian member, Natalia Tadei. She's here, she's attending. You saw her, and she's also a qualified speech therapist herself and an interpreter trainer at PUC Rio de Janeiro. So feel free to get in touch either via AIIC Brasil or directly through the AIIC homepage. There's a Science Hub tab in the Inside AIIC section where you can access us and get in touch with us. And with the speaker's permission, and obviously to support your effort, we'd be also honored to link the recordings of tonight's webinar to our growing interpreter health repository. Thank you so much for inviting AIIC Science Hub. I don't want to take up your time longer. We all want to hear what our keynote speakers have to say. Thank you again. Let's have a fruitful discussion, maybe Q&A afterwards, and take care. And I'm glad to be here. I'm far away, but I still feel I'm in this community. Thank you.
Obrigada, Peter. Nós realmente
Thank you
estamos
very
muito
much,
felizes
Peter.
e muito
We're
honrados com a
very
sua
happy
presença
and
aqui essa
honored
noite.
indeed with your presence here this evening.
Eu o
And
apresentei, mas
I
eu acabei
introduced myself,
esquecendo de me
but I forgot
apresentar.
to.
Meu nome é
introduce
Larissa
others.
Benevides, eu sou
My name is
presidente da AIIC
Larissa
Brasil.
Benevides.
Para
I'm
aqueles que
president of
chegaram
AIIC
depois, que
Brazil.
talvez não me
For people that
conheçam,
came in later that may
é
not know
prazer
me
estar aqui
already,
acompanhada
it's a
das
huge
colegas
pleasure
do Bureau
be here
Cecília de
with the people
Sukamoto, que
from
foi
the Bureau.
inclusive uma das
Cecília Sukamoto was
idealizadoras
one
desse
of the
encontro.
persons that
Se a
conceived this
Cecília
meeting
puder dar
this evening.
oizinho aí,
Cecília,
para a
if you
gente
can
saber
give
quem
us
que é
a hello
você.
for people to know who you
Matos, que
are.
é a nossa
Cecília
secretária, e
Matos,
Flávia
who is our
Romano,
secretary, and
que
Flavia
é
Romano,
a nossa
who is
tesoureira. E
our
hoje, da AIIC
treasurer.
Central, nós
And
também temos
from
aqui
AIIC
a
Central, we
honra
have
de
here the
acolher a
honor
Fernanda
of welcoming
Matias, que é uma
Fernanda
das
Matias, who
vice-presidentes da
is one of the
AIIC,
vice presidents of
Mer
AIIC,
Gordilho, que está aqui conosco
right?
também. Mer,
Le
muito obrigada mais uma
Gordilho,
vez
muito
pelo
obrigado mais
apoio de
uma vez
sempre. E
for the
Lívia Cass,
support.
que
And
é do
Lívia
PRIMS,
Kass
e
is from
que
PRIMS,
também é
and
com muito
also
orgulho que a gente te
it's a
acolhe aqui
source of
hoje.
pride
Ô,
for
Liv, muito
us to
obrigada pela
welcome you
presença.
here,
Sabemos que
Lívia.
você
So
também é
we
muito
know that
ocupado.
you are very
Pois
busy.
bem, sem
Great.
mais
So
delongas, eu
without
agora vou
further
passar a
ado, I'm going to
palavra
turn the
para a
floor over
nossa
to our
co-anfitriã, uma colega muito especial e muito
co-host,
querida
a
para
dear
todos
colleague,
nós,
dear
Andréa
to all of us,
Negreda. Andréa,
Andrea
muito obrigada por
Negreda.
ter
Andrea,
aceito o nosso
thank you very much for
convite para
having
estar aqui com a
accepted our
gente hoje à
invitation to
noite e
be
que vai
here with us this
apresentar
evening. Who's going to
também
be
os
introducing
nossos
also
oradores.
our
Andréia,
speakers.
ela é
Andrea,
membro AIIC,
she's a member of
AIIC Brasil, mais
AIIC Brazil
especificamente, e
specifically,
ela
and
é
she
intérprete profissional,
is a
foi
professional
inclusive
interpreter. She was
ex-presidente
a
da
former
APIC
president of
há alguns
APIC
mandatos atrás e é uma
several
pessoa
terms
muito
ago,
querida para
and
todos
she's a
nós.
dear
Andréia, muito
colleague and friend
bem-vinda
for all of us.
e a palavra está com você.
Andrea, welcome, and you have the floor.
Boa noite, Larissa.
Good
Boa
evening,
noite,
Larissa.
todos
Good
os
evening, all of our
amigos,
dear friends,
amigas da
men and
AIIC.
women
É
from
prazer
AIIC.
estar com vocês
It's
aqui.
a
Muito
pleasure to be
obrigada
with you this
pelo
evening. So thank you
convite.
very much for the invitation.
Eu fico sempre
And
dizendo que
I always say
os
that
meus amigos
my
da
friends
interpretação não me
in
deixam
interpretation
esquecer
don't
do
let me
meu
forget
da minha
my
antiga formação, que é
former training,
exatamente em
which is
fonoaudiologia.
precisely in
Mas
speech
ouvindo o
therapy.
Peter
But
agora, eu fiquei
now,
pensando
listening
nisso,
to
como as
Peter, I thought
coisas,
to this,
que
things,
início perfeito desse
what kind
nosso
of a perfect
encontro, não é?
beginning for a
Porque o
meeting this
Peter
evening,
também é
because
alguém que
Peter,
era
somebody
da
who
área
is
médica, que
it's the
passou a
medical
fazer
area in the
interpretação
field
e que
who did
a gente acaba,
interpretation, we just,
de certa forma,
in a sense,
entrando no outro assunto. A
enter into
Natália
the other
também, que é uma
topic.
excelente
Natalia, who is
intérprete,
an
também
excellent
minha
interpreter and
ex-colega
my
fonoaudióloga.
former speech
Então é
therapist
por isso que
colleague.
eu fui
So that is
convidada para
why
ser
I was
hoje
invited to be
aqui essa
the
mediadora da conversa que nós
chair or
vamos ter com os
mediator of
nossos
the conversation that we're
convidados.
going to have with our guest
Eu sou
speakers.
intérprete
So I'm an
de
interpreter,
conferências já há
a conference
aproximadamente
interpreter for
25
approximately,
anos,
have been for
fui
25 years.
fonoaudióloga na
I
vida
was a speech
prévia,
therapist in my
mas
former life,
acabei usando
but I
os meus
ended up using
contatos
my contacts,
importantes
important
exatamente para
contacts,
atuar muito
precisely
na
to
área da
work
medicina, que é o que eu faço
intensively in
primordialmente
medicine,
como
which I
dos
mainly do
principais
is one of
assuntos,
my
né?
main
Então é muito
topics
bom
in
estar
medical
aqui. Não
topics.
sou
So it's great to
qualificada
be here.
para falar
I'm
nada
not
sobre voz,
qualified to
mas
say
para
anything
mediar a
about voice,
conversa,
but I
tenho
can
certeza
share
que
the
vai dar tudo
conversation.
certo.
I'm certain that everything
E
will
nem
work
precisa
nevertheless.
ser
And
qualificado para conversar
you
com
don't have to be
dois
qualified to
especialistas
speak to
incríveis
two
como os que
incredible
nós temos hoje,
specialists like
a
the ones that
doutora
we have
Glaucya
this
Madazio e o doutor Luciano
Glaucya
Neves.
and Luciano
Eu não sei
Neves.
se a
I
gente
don't
tem uma
know if we
apresentação com o
have an
bio deles
introduction
ou se vocês
with their
preferem que
resume,
eu
or
só
if you
leia
prefer me
aqui
to read it
ou se
here,
todo mundo já
or if
leu e a
everybody has
gente
already read it.
segue. Desculpe que eu
If,
não prestei
well,
atenção nessa
whatever.
parte do roteiro.
I didn't pay attention to that part of the script. Okay.
Andréia, fica à vontade para poder
Andrea,
dar algumas
feel
informações a
free
respeito
to give
do
some
currículo
additional
deles, por favor.
information
Tá
considering
bom,
their
tá
resume.
ótimo,
So
com
fine,
prazer.
okay.
Eu vou
It'll
ler
be a
aqui o
pleasure. Okay,
currículo
I'm going to
exatamente
read
que eles
precisely
nos
that
enviaram,
they
que eu imagino
sent
que
us.
vocês tenham
I would
visto
imagine
também.
that you
A
have also
doutora
seen it. Dr. Glaucya
Madazio, que também
Madazio,
é minha
who is also
cliente,
my client.
ela é
She is a
fonoaudióloga,
speech therapist
especialista
and a
em
specialist
voz
in
pelo
voice
Conselho
under
Federal de
the Federal
Fonoaudiologia,
Speech
mestre em
Therapy
Estudos da
Council, has a
Comunicação pela
master's in communication
UNIFESP,
studies
aqui
from
em
the
Rio,
University of São Paulo,
também
and
minha
she is
faculdade,
also my
doutora em
own
ciências pela
alma
mesma
mater. She is a
universidade,
PhD
fez
from
o
the
seu
same university. She
pós-doutorado
did
em
her postdoc
fonoaudiologia
in
na
speech
UFPB
therapy at the
vice-coordenadora e
UFPB
professora do
University in
curso de
Paraíba.
especialização
She's
em
a
voz
professor
do
in
CEF, que é o
specialization in
Centro de
voice at
Estudos da
the Center
Voz.
for Voice
Ela é
Studies,
professora
CEV.
de
She's a
comunicação para
professor in
negócios no
communication,
Insper.
business
Bem-vinda,
communications in
Glaucia. Vou
Insper,
chamar de Glaucia.
a business think tank. I'm
E
going
o
to call her
Dr.
Glaucia,
Luciano
and Dr.
Neves,
Luciano
ele
Neves.
é
He is
médico,
a MD and
otorrinolaringologista pela Sociedade,
otorhinolaryngologist from the
de
Brazilian Society of
Otorrino e
Otorhinolaryngology
Cirurgia
and
Craniofacial. Ele é
Craniofacial
mestre e
Surgery. He
doutor
is
pela
a master
UNIFESP
and has
também,
PhD from the University
professor
of
do
São Paulo,
CEF,
a professor
do
in the
Centro de
Voice
Estudos da
Studies
Voz. Ele é
Center.
editor
He
da
is an editor
Laryngologia, que é a
of
publicação
Laryngology, which
Brazilian
is a
Journal of
publication of the Brazilian Journal of
Otolaryngology. Ele é
Otorhinolaryngology. He's the
ex-presidente da
former
Academia
president
Brasileira
of the
de
Brazilian Academy of
Laringologia e Voz.
Laryngology
Seja
and Voice.
bem-vindo,
You're
Dr.
all
Luciano.
welcome. You're welcome, Dr.
Eu
Luciano,
fico
as
muito
well.
contente de tê-los
Doctors
aqui conosco.
Glaucia and
E o
Luciano,
que
I'm
nós
happy to have you
pensamos em
with us. And
fazer
what did we
foi
think of doing? It was
começar com
precise to
algumas
begin
perguntas.
with a few
Muitos
questions.
talvez tenham mandado
Some
as
of
perguntas
them,
pelo
some of you
Slido,
probably
né?
sent
E nós
questions in
tínhamos
through
pensado
Slido,
numa
and we
estrutura
thought of
em
a
que muitas
structure
das
here
perguntas
where
se
a lot of the
encaixaram.
questions
Então, eu
fit
acho
into
que a
the
gente vai
structure, the
conseguir
script for the meeting. We
seguir
thought
muito bem
we can
esse
follow
nosso
the script,
bate-papo, que é
and with this
informal, que é
our
muito tranquilo.
informal
E
conversation.
depois, no final,
And
se a gente
afterwards, at
tiver
the
ainda
end,
mais
if we
tempo, a
still
gente
have
pode
a little
abrir
bit
para
of time,
outras
we can open
perguntas,
for
tá bem?
other
Vamos
questions
seguir
from the
assim?
audience. Okay, is that okay with everybody?
Vamos lá.
Okay,
Eu
thank you very much.
acho
Okay,
que a gente tem que
I
começar pelo
believe that we
começo, não
need
é?
to begin from
Então,
the
eu vou
beginning.
pedir
Okay, so I'm
para
going
que
to ask
vocês,
for
por favor,
you,
falem um pouquinho
please,
para a
to
gente
tell us a
sobre o
little bit
básico.
about the
Anatomia,
basics, the anatomy,
fisiologia, o
physiology,
funcionamento da
the
voz, esse
functioning of
panorama
voice,
geral que
this
todo mundo
overview
precisa
that
ter para
everybody
entender
needs
a
to
importância desse
understand the importance
mecanismo
of this
e
mechanism
dessa
and
função que é
this
absolutamente
function, which is
essencial para o nosso
essential
trabalho.
for
Não
our
sei quem
work.
quer
Okay,
começar,
I
por
don't know who
favor.
wants to begin, Glaucia or Luciano.
Pode ir, Lu.
Go ahead, Lou, or
Boa noite a
for
todos.
Luciano.
Antes de
Good
mais nada, eu queria
evening, everyone.
agradecer ao
I want
imenso
to thank the
convite. Eu fiquei
invitation.
muito
I
honrado
was
com o
really
convite da
honored
Cecília, da
with
Andréia e da
the
Larissa
invitation,
em
Andre
poder
and Larissa,
participar.
to be able to
Ao
participate.
longo da semana, eu fui
Over
vendo
the
o
course of the
tamanho
week.
desse
I looked
compromisso,
the
um compromisso hercúleo,
commitment that I would
muito
have. It's
difícil.
a
Eu queria
Herculean
agradecer
task
às três tradutoras para o
with three
espanhol, para o
different
francês, para o inglês, que
translators
estão
into
nessa
Spanish, French, and
nossa
English. So
missão de tentar
our
passar um
mission
pouco
here
do
to
nosso
try to
conhecimento a
express
vocês
and transmit some of our
e
knowledge to you
difundi-lo ao
is
mundo.
a big
Eu
task
agradeço muito a
and
todos que
spread
estão
across
se
the world. So I want
dedicando
to
a
thank
isso.
everybody
Bom, quando
who's
nós
helping us
falamos
with
em
this.
voz, é muito prático que é o mecanismo de comunicação que aqui eu estou usando e que vocês utilizam para tradução.
we use
Quer
for
seja
translation
português para
is a very
francês ou
practical
vice-versa.
tool,
Mas também é muito importante
but
entender
it's
como
very important that
funciona
we
esse
understand
instrumento.
exactly how
Na
this instrument
verdade,
works.
são estruturas que são totalmente emprestadas. Eu empresto boca, dente,
I use
língua, que são estruturas que
my
são usadas para
tongue, my mouth,
mastigar,
my
que
teeth
são estruturas que
to
são utilizadas para comer,
chew,
para
to
falar,
eat,
para
and to
articular
speak,
os sons que são
to
produzidos nas
make the
cordas
sounds
vocais.
that
Então,
are
eu
produced
utilizo
in my
o
vocal
meu
folds.
sistema
So I used
respiratório,
my
eu exalo
respiratory
o ar,
system.
coloco o ar para
I
fora, esse ar
breathe
passa
out.
nas pregas vocais e
This
ele
passes through
sofre
my vocal folds,
modificação pelas
and it
estruturas que são
then
chamadas de
is
estruturas
modified
consonantais.
through the
Boca,
resonatory
dente,
system,
língua,
again,
palato
through my
mole, palato duro,
tongue, through my mouth,
cavidade
through my
nasal. É
lips, through
dessa
my teeth,
maneira que,
etc.
com uma
And it
boa
is this
escuta,
way
eu
that
preciso também a
to
participação
listen
do meu
well, to
aparelho
hear
auditivo,
well,
eu
I need to
consigo
have,
gerar uma comunicação.
I
Mas
can
a
then have,
comunicação
and
também tem que ser
using my
levada em
ears, I can
consideração não
then
só os
communicate
ritmos
properly.
anatômicos e fisiológicos.
So there's
Tem também que
anatomical
ser levado
sides,
em
parts,
consideração a
and
língua que eu utilizo. E
physical
não
parts.
só a língua. Para cada
It's
uma
not
das
just the
línguas eu
language,
tenho questões
it's,
do tipo regionalismo,
there are regionalisms,
acentuação,
there are accents,
prosódia e como eu faço no caso
prosody,
de vocês na tradução.
and in the case of
Vamos de
you,
modo
in
muito
translation.
simples, eu vou
So
pedir para a
very
Glaucia colocar os
simply, putting it
slides
very,
que
very
ela
simply, and Glaucia will
gentilmente
share
separou,
the
mas
slides,
vai ser possível entender
but
pouco dessas
we'll be able to
estruturas anatômicas
understand
que ali
these
estão,
anatomical
que
structures that
habilmente
we
você utiliza
use,
no seu dia a
or that
dia.
you use in your day-to-day
Obrigada,
life,
Luciano.
in your
Bom,
profession.
também quero agradecer o
Thank you
convite
very
de estar
much.
aqui.
I also want to
Cecília,
thank you all
Larissa,
for this
Andréa,
invitation, Cecilia,
Flávia, outra
Larissa,
Cecília.
Andrea, Flavia,
Muito
Cecilia.
obrigada
Thank you
pelo
so much for the
convite. Eu
invitation to be here
realmente tenho
today. I
uma adoração pela profissão de
absolutely
vocês.
love your
Fico muito
profession.
feliz sempre que eu preciso
And
falar com a Andréa, porque
whenever I
parece que
can, whenever I get the
falando
opportunity to talk to
portunhol.
Andrea, I love
Então,
talking to her
às vezes
because
eu
it seems
mando algumas
like she
palavras
just absolutely
específicas só para não
understands
ter problema, porque eu sei que a gente vai dar tudo
what I'm
certo,
talking
né,
about.
Andréa? Então,
I know everything
obrigada
is
por essa
going to go
parceria.
perfect when I
Eu fiquei
talk
muito
to her.
feliz
And
quando o Peter falou
when
sobre a questão
Peter
da
talked
voz.
about the voice and hearing, because everyone always pays attention to hearing. Everyone thinks that's the most important thing, not just in your profession, but elsewhere as well. Wherever we use voice and hearing, hearing is always seen as the most important thing. But we're actually starting to turn things around and show how important the voice is. In fact, even in teaching courses, there are so few voices, classes for the voice. And only in singing classes or in conservatories do we see this even more. Although this has started to change in recent years because people are starting to recognize that the voice is an absolutely critical instrument, and human communication is increasingly seen as important, right? So we see other professionals working to improve their communication, and the voice is one of the ways that one of the tools that we have so that we can have better relationships and get better results, not just professionally, but also personally as well. So the role of the voice is absolutely critical in all of this. I actually did prep some slides, but I am not sure how to, I think I need to be co-host to share my slides.
Deixa eu ver se me aparece aqui. Agora já deu. Deixa eu, só um minutinho que agora me atrapalhei aqui. Muita tela aberta aqui na minha frente, só um minutinho. Eu quero compartilhar
Give me 1 second to get this set up.
Joguinho de slides que é só para deixar mais prático o que
I'm
o
using these
Luciano
slides
acabou de falar.
to
Vocês vão ver a minha tela toda bagunçada.
Sorry about this crazy screen here.
Sua tela é igual a de todos nós aqui, doutora
We all
Glaucia,
have the
não se
same. It's
preocupe.
all the same for all of us here. Everyone's
A única
screen looks like
diferença é
that.
que a gente não está compartilhando a nossa.
The only difference is that we're
Totalmente
not sharing
tranquila.
our desktops, but we all have the exact same desktop. You can be absolutely sure of that. Okay.
A voz é produzida na laringe.
The voice is produced in the larynx, which is in our neck. This is the structure of the larynx, with all the cartilage, all the different muscles. We can't see all of them, but this is where it sits in the neck. So this structure over here on the left is where it sits in the neck on the right. We have two vocal folds. They are not cords. They're not guitar cords. They're two vocal folds. And in order to hear a voice, can you hear me? Yes, okay. In order to produce anything from our voice, there are other systems that we employ, and it's a number of different systems. So air comes from the lungs, it pushes up through the vocal folds. This here is an image of the vocal folds in a very modern image, and you can see the muscle of the vocal folds and what's vibrating, which is a mucal membrane. Okay, and that's what gives quality to the voice. This movement in the vocal folds is a buzz. It just makes this sound. This is the sound.
Dá para ouvir? Não deu para ouvir?
Não, será que você compartilhou quando começou?
I don't think you shared sound when you shared your slides.
Vou fazer de novo. Compartilhar, fiquei tensa, esqueci.
É que essa parte de ouvir é muito interessante, né? Essa percepção auditiva da voz, eu sei que vocês têm algumas outras coisas para mostrar também.
Auditory perception of the voice is absolutely important. Okay. So again, vocal folds, they're open. That's when we're breathing. And they need to vibrate. But the vocal fold doesn't do anything like bop, 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 ah, ba, ba. It just makes a sound. That's all it does.
Esse é o som da prega vocal.
That's the sound from the vocal folds. It's a laryngeal buzz. What truly gives it more texture is the mouth and all of the different different organs of the body in the oral facial area. When we chew, everything that we use to chew is also what gives the sound or texture to the sound. However, I open my mouth, my tongue, my teeth, all of that interferes in sound production. So all of these three systems working together is what creates the voice. Do I have air to push through the vocal folds? Are the vocal folds vibrating properly, offering clear, audible sound to hear, pleasurable to hear? And am I using all of my articulators, my mouth, the location of my tongue, the pharynx? Is it too tight? Is it open? So if I open my mouth partially, or if I put my tongue forward or pull my tongue back, this will give me a certain sound, A, B, U. If I can lengthen my vowels. So this means working with the articulation. When Peter was talking about vocal clarity, there are two things that we need to think about: the sound clarity, the quality of the voice, and articulatory clarity. Speaking sounds need to be audible. All of the sounds that we speak need to be audible. If we are listening to another language, for example, we sometimes connect these sounds where someone in another language perhaps may not be able to understand what we're saying. So articulation and speech is really critical for vocal production. So I think this answers your question. How does the voice produce sound? Or how do we produce our voices? I think it was very clear with the images. And I think that was a wonderful introduction to talk about some of the other qualitative aspects. So we know how the voice is produced. It's used for communication. We know that. But what is behind the voice in terms of vocal quality, in terms of intention? Do different voices lead to different impressions in others? Is your voice somewhat like your thumbprint? Is it unique? Let's talk about these. Let's talk about vocal quality and vocal production. Yes. Luciano, would you like to start? Yes, I'm happy to start. So I'd like to jump off what Glaucya mentioned before. The real question is that we all need to find our identity over lives. Sometimes we develop our own identities, sometimes they're impressed upon us based on our differences, of course. And I develop my identity over time and my vocal identity over time. And this is very much influenced by my country, the country where I live, the society in which I'm inserted, the people I talk to, my community. So I live in São Paulo. I speak Brazilian Portuguese. And if I really drill down at speech language pathologists, they'll understand that I have an accent that is not from the city of São Paulo, it's from the city of Santos. So the voice offers context with its consonants, with its vowels, with its structure. And just as a parenthesis, the consonants are pronounced through articulators and their vowels are pronounced through the aspiratory parts. A is a vowel, A vowel pronounced in the back. So in Brazilian Portuguese, there are 5 written vowels, but I have 8 phonemes: an open A, closed A, open E, closed E, O, U, etc. Each language includes variations in the number of vowels and in the number of consonants. And just like Glaucya mentioned, at some moment I may be able to make a P sound from Paulo in Portuguese. It's very sonorous, but it's a lot more aspirated in English. It'd be Paulo in English versus Paulo in Portuguese. There are interpreters, and when I talk to them, when they come to me, I ask them to talk in their different languages. The timbre is different, the tone is different when they speak their different languages.
É verdade. Desculpa, Andrea, pode falar.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. I just wanted to make a quick comment on vowels. The number of vowels in French is unbelievable. I'm sorry, my interpreter friends who work with French, but I think vowels are the hardest part of the French language. We once, in an exercise I did, we had to listen to the different A's from some Oriental language. I don't remember which it was, but I heard only 3 different sounds, but there were 20 different sounds being produced. So it's a very highly trained auditory process to be able to differentiate each one of those sounds. I liked Luciano's introduction when it comes to vocal identity. And in addition to what he already mentioned, I have a few more points. There's a great speech language pathologist, journalist, musician, writer, and doctor. He was a great, he studied the voice, and he said, the voice often reaches people before any other form of communication. And that, for me, it represents how we present ourselves in the world. That's how I see the voice. So Luciano talked about language, location in the country, regionalisms, but also it's an expression of our personality. It impresses upon others the tone that others use to judge us and determine who we are. So for those who'd like to work with communication, you can make your voice sound more mature, immature, stronger, weaker, by using and modulating your voice. Voice is behavior, and any behavior can be changed. So it's important to think about, what am I putting into this voice? How is this voice reaching the other person? And is that my actual intention when I'm communicating? This may not be our intention, but the way I am communicating, the way my voice reaches the other person, is how the other person is going to see me. So it's important to keep in mind that they're not just regional issues that we have to take into account, but there are psychological, personality-based issues that we should also take into account when we think about our voice. Our voice is also produced through anatomical organs. My anatomy is different from Luciano's anatomy, and Larissa, Andrea, Flavia, you all have different anatomies. And this will also impress upon my identity. Voice used to be the instrument that identified someone. Let's say, in a trial, you can tell in any situation who's being threatening, and you can see specific traits of people, depending on how they modulate the voice, how they end a phrase, how they pronounce letter R, the letter E. This characterizes the speaker. So, Andrea, answering your question, yes, voices are indeed an identity. Everyone has their own unique vocal identity. And through acoustic analysis, I can tell whether it's my voice or your voice, even though frequency may be the same, our accent may be the same or very similar. There are aspects that are just unique to me, to you, and to everyone. Pauses, how we articulate, how much credibility I express in my voice. And it's through the voice that people say, I trust in so-and-so, or I don't trust in so-and-so. What comes through in our voice? It's how we express ourselves, how we articulate the sounds, how we build out our rationale, but it's through the voice that we build confidence, trust. and
fiz durante
connection.
bastante
And I
tempo
think
trabalho para
this
cliente
is very
que
interesting.
era
I worked with
media
a client for
training para
many years
políticos,
on
né?
media
Um
training
assunto
for
controverso.
politicians.
Mas ele
A bit
dizia
controversial,
isso, que
probably,
todas as
but that is
vezes que eles
exactly what he said.
testavam
Every time
diferentes
they
grupos,
tested out with
as
tested out
pessoas
different
se
groups,
ligavam na produção da
people
voz,
noticed
na
production,
entonação, na
voice,
pausa, no
intonation,
jeito de falar.
pauses,
Então,
the
muitas vezes eles
way
tinham
people
grupos,
spoke.
o grupo lendo
So sometimes
exatamente o mesmo
they would
discurso,
bring in groups
cada
reading the
com
same
tipo
discourse, each
dessas
group
técnicas, e as
using
pessoas
different
acreditavam no
techniques,
grupo que tinha pausas, que tinha
and
velocidade, que
people
tinha entonação, e
trusted
diziam,
those
quando
who had proper
perguntavam, e a mensagem?
intonation
Eles
or
diziam, não, a
good
mensagem é
pauses,
outra,
etc.
completamente
And
diferente.
they would
E
ask
eram
them what the message
exatamente
was.
as mesmas
They would get
palavras.
different
Né?
answers depending
Então,
on
isso é
how that
muito
discourse was
interessante.
read and produced.
E encontra muita ressonância no que nós fazemos,
And
porque
this really resonates with what we do as
interpretação é um
interpreters.
trabalho curioso em
Interpreters
que a
is
gente
a very
vai
interesting job.
participar de evento, encontro, em
We
que
take
todo
part
mundo
in an
sabe o que
event.
está fazendo ali, porque faz aquilo
Everybody
todos os
knows what
dias,
they're
e
doing
a
there.
gente
They're the
chega no
specialists. They
dia
do that
e
every single day.
intermedia
We
essa
show up
comunicação como
and we
se
intermediate
entendesse o
that
que está
communication as
acontecendo.
if we truly
Então, acho que
understood
a
what's
nossa
actually
voz,
being
claro,
said.
a gente se
So our
prepara, a
voice,
gente estuda,
we
mas a
prepare, we
forma
study,
como nós falamos
but the way we
ajuda,
speak
eu imagino,
helps,
o
I
cliente
believe,
muitas vezes a fazer
helps
fechamento, dizer, a
clients
gente fala uma coisa
understand.
errada, claro, ou
Of
pula
course, we say the
pedaço, mas
wrong
a
thing
forma
sometimes.
como
Sometimes
nós
we skip
falamos, com
things, but the
a
way we
energia que a gente
speak,
precisava,
the
ou a
energy
entonação,
that we
acaba
put in,
ajudando a
or the
fazer o
intonation that we put
fechamento, né? Essa
into
impressão
that
que eu
production
tenho da
is
voz, e
what
quem ouve
ensures
muitas vezes a
trust
interpretação
in
nos
those
diz
who are
isso,
listening to
né?
us. And at least that's what
Agora,
I hear from my
estamos
clients.
falando de voz profissional.
Now
Então,
we're talking about
agora é a hora.
professional voices, using the
Todo
voice
mundo aqui
professionally.
vive da sua voz.
Everybody uses their
E
voice
para nós é instrumento
to make a
importantíssimo,
living.
como o
It's a
Peter
very
muito bem disse.
important
O
tool
que
for
a
all of us,
gente
as
tem que
Peter
fazer,
mentioned.
hein?
So what do we
O
need
que
to
que os
do? What
intérpretes
do
têm que
we
fazer? Como que a
interpreters need
gente
to
pode
do
lidar com as nossas situações mais difíceis,
with our
de às vezes ter
voices?
trabalho numa
What can
voz
we do?
sussurrada,
How
de
can
às
we take
vezes
care of our
ter
voice? Sometimes we have to whisper.
speaker que fala rápido demais,
Sometimes
que
there are
ninguém
speakers
consegue
who
seguir. E
speak
quando a gente vê, a gente está
really
falando assim,
quickly.
já
And
agudizando.
when we're not
Enfim,
even, and
quais
before
são
we
as
notice it, we're
dicas? O que
all
que vocês podem nos
pulling our
ajudar
pitch really up
nesse
high.
sentido?
What are some of the
Antes,
techniques
durante
that
e
we can
depois.
do to take care of our
Simples a
voices
pergunta, né?
before, during, and after
É a
our
pergunta de
jobs?
milhões, né?
Pode começar, Glaucya.
That's the $1 million question, right?
Bom,
Okay.
eu costumo
So
dizer assim que
I
a
always
voz é
say
commodity,
that voice
certo?
is a
A gente
commodity,
tem que
right?
pensar
So we
que a
have to think
voz,
that
quanto
the
mais eu
voice,
gasto essa
the more
voz,
I
mais eu vou
use my
perdendo e
voice,
vou
the
ter que
more
fazer
I
coisas
lose, and
para
I'm trying to do
trazê-la de
things
volta.
to bring it
E
back, to
aí, quando eu
recover it.
penso em voz
When I think
profissional, é
about a
justamente nesse
professional
sentido.
voice, it's
Não
in
tem
this
como
sense.
vocês não
You
usarem a
can't
voz.
not use
Vocês
your
usam a
voice.
voz,
You
ponto.
use your
A
voice,
partir
right?
daí, o que a gente
Period.
faz com
So
isso?
what can
O
we
que a gente
do
pode
in relation
trazer
to that?
de
What can we do
benefícios para
to
essa voz?
benefit
Um
our
dos
voice?
comportamentos mais
One of the
equivocados
most
para a voz é
mistaken
falar em voz
behaviors
com
for voice
intensidade.
is to
Então,
speak
dos
too
cuidados que a gente
intensely.
precisa ter
One
é
of the
não falar
precautions that we
alto.
have to take is
Pensando
not
sempre
to
que
talk
vocês
too
normalmente
loud.
estão
Whenever you're normally
microfonadas,
you have
então a gente
interference
precisa
with the microphone,
treinar
we need to
falar,
train
modular a
speaking to
voz.
modulate your
Quanto mais
voice,
eu
because the
modulo a voz,
more
mais
you
eu
modulate the
protejo
voice,
essa
the more you
voz.
protect your
Quanto
voice,
mais eu
the more you
modulo, menos eu
modulate your
corro o
voice, the
risco,
less
André,
you
de
run the
entrar
risk, Andrea,
nesse ajuste
to
que você acabou de falar.
make this kind of adjustment
Que hora
with
que eu tô
high-pitched voice.
tensa, eu tô realmente colocando uma
Um,
voz mais aguda, mais
my
forte, com pouca
we're using a
modulação.
higher
E
pitched
isso
voice with less
cansa
modulation
muito.
of voice, and this
Pela
tires you
experiência que
out.
eu tenho com
Based on my
vocês, com
experience with
você mais
you all, with
especificamente, eu
you more
vejo que vocês
specifically, I can see that
alternam
you
bastante. Então,
alternate
vocês vão, eu
frequently.
não sei
So I
exatamente
don't know exactly
quanto
how
tempo
long,
vocês ficam falando e
you
depois troca a
interpret,
pessoa, enfim.
and then you
Isso
switch
já é um
places.
cuidado
This
muito
is a
legal. O
very important
certo
measure.
seria assim,
The
eu
right thing
falo
would be
20 minutos, eu
I should speak
repouso
for
20
20 minutes and
minutos.
I rest for 20
Mas é
minutes, okay?
inviável, não dá para a
But
gente
it's
fazer isso.
not
Imagina uma
feasible.
professora
It's
que dá
impossible. Just
3
remember,
turnos de
just think
aula,
of a teacher
como é que
who
a gente faz?
teaches in 3
Não dá.
different shifts
Então, eu
in a
tenho que
school.
pensar em
It's
outras medidas para
unfeasible. So you
proteger
have to
essa
think of other
voz.
measures to protect your
Outras
voice, right?
medidas que a
Other
gente
kind of
pode
measures
pensar é,
that
por
we
exemplo,
can think of
treinar
would be to
falar mais
train to
rápido.
speak
Isso é
faster.
treino. Você
This is
trouxe agora a
training.
questão do
You
speaker que
raise the
fala muito
issue of the
rápido.
speaker who
Como é que
speaks
eu
too
faço
fast.
com isso?
How
Eu
do you deal with that, you need to train my own skill in speaking faster, or to select who's going to be the person who has greater skills to translate that fast speaker, to interpret that fast speaker, and have this be more as natural as possible for not to run and make the mistake of speaking at a higher pitch. oh, it sounds too tense and
Nossa,
strained.
acontece. Às vezes a
But
gente, sei lá, não tá num bom
things
dia, o
happen.
tema é
You're
difícil,
not
ou
on
sei
a
lá,
good
estressou.
day.
Então, o
It's
que
a
que eu posso
difficult
fazer?
subject and it's
Beber mais
stressful.
água,
You can drink
colocar,
more
por exemplo,
water,
um
have
nebulizador dentro da
a
cabine e fechar a
nebulizer
lata,
inside the booth and leave it
ir
there
hidratando essa
to
mucosa da sua tragaça
hydrate
bucólica ao
the
mesmo tempo que eu estou
mucosa
falando.
of your
Estou gastando, estou
muscles. When you're
ressecando essa
speaking, you're
mucosa que
drying out
recobre
the
tudo isso. Eu coloco
mucosa
uma
that
coisa que
covers that,
está
the lining.
repondo
You have something that's
essa
replacing and
umidificação. Então,
replenishing
esse é
the moisture
um outro
in your
dispositivo que a gente
voice
pode usar
organs.
para
This
que
is another
fortaleça essa voz,
approach
para
that you
que
can
não
do to
gaste
strengthen
tanto
your
essa
voice, to
voz.
not wear out your
Então, beber
voice
água,
and strain it too much.
fazer
Drink more
exercícios
water,
antes de entrar na
do
cabine.
exercises before you
Para
enter the
que
booth.
fazer exercício?
Why
Não é
do
um exercício
exercises? It's not
intenso ou
just intense
extenso, né,
exercise
por
or
muito
too
tempo.
long,
Às vezes é um ou
hours
outro
on end.
exercício que é
It's
só para
one or another
colocar esse
exercise just to
instrumento,
have your
a
instrument,
laringe,
your
em estado de
larynx,
prontidão.
in this state of readiness.
Então, eu
Okay,
deixo esse
so
instrumento pronto para
you've
isso.
this
E são
instrument ready
dois
to
ou
work.
três exercícios para o
2 or 3
cérebro entender e falar assim,
exercises for the
tá
brain to
bom,
understand,
entendi, agora
okay,
ela vai
we're
começar a
fine.
falar
Now we're going
mais.
to be to speak
Ah, então eu vou
more.
começar a
Okay,
falar
so I'm going to
mais, eu
begin to
preciso
speak
pensar que eu
more.
tenho
So
que
I need to
articular
remember that I have
melhor,
to articulate
modular
my
melhor
voice
a minha
and
voz,
modulate my voice
colocar
better,
pausa quando eu posso,
to
quando a
have
pessoa está
pauses
falando muito
whenever I
rápido,
can.
né?
If we
Colocar
don't
pausa
have a
quando eu
too
posso.
quick
Esses
a
são os
speaker,
comportamentos que
these are
mais
the kinds of
protegem
behaviors
a
that
voz
protect
profissional.
our
Não
professional
sei se o Luciano
voice.
quer
I
complementar
don't
com
know
alguma
if
coisa.
Luciano would like to add something
Não,
to that.
eu,
You want to
eu
weigh
acho
in,
que a
Luciano?
Glaucia
Okay,
passou os principais
Glaucia give us the
detalhes
main
e eu queria
details
lembrar
already, and
alguns
I would
outros
just
que
like
são
to
tão
remember a
importantes
few more,
quanto.
which are
Sem
as
sombra de
important
dúvidas, um
as
bom
they are.
sistema
It's
auditivo.
a
Ou
great
seja,
auditory system is
por
crucial.
vezes isso passa um
Sometimes
pouco despercebido. Então,
it
se
goes unnoticed. So
se o fornecimento de
if
audição para você não
the
tiver
hearing
bom,
for
você
you
vai
is not good,
sobrecarregar.
you
Você vai ter uma tendência a falar
overburden,
mais alto
you
ou falar
speak
de modo
louder,
desajustado.
or
A Glaucia
poorly
falou que
adjusted voice.
tanto a
Glaucia said
umidificação como a
both
hidratação são
humidity
itens
and
que devem ser
hydration are items
colocados no
that
dia a
should be
dia.
part
E
of your
mais do que
daily
isso,
work.
acho que seria
And
interessante vocês
another thing is that it's
estabelecerem uma
essentially for you to
métrica.
establish
O que é estabelecer uma
metrics.
métrica? Ao
What is a
acordar
metric
ou antes de
when you wake up,
iniciar
or even you
uma
begin
tradução,
before you begin
testar a
translating,
sua própria
to
voz.
test your own
E
voice,
com
right?
isso, criar
And
no
you
seu
create
ouvido, na
in
sua
your
mente,
hearing,
um
in
banco
your
que você vai
brain,
fazendo
a
todos os
bank
dias. Por
that you're
exemplo,
going
quando
to
eu vou analisar um
deposit in when
paciente,
I
eu
analyze
peço
a
para ele
patient. I
frases
ask them
específicas.
to speak
Quando eu lido com um
specific
cantor, eu peço
phrases
para
when I
todo dia de
deal with a
manhã,
singer. Every
antes dele
morning
começar
before
o
the
seu
singer
aquecimento, ou antes
begins
dele
their
começar
warm
o
up,
seu
before they
estudo,
begin
ele
their
fazer
study,
frases ou
they speak
músicas que ele vai ouvir
phrases
todos
or
os dias.
songs
E com
every
isso
day,
ele consegue
and
ir
they are able thereby
entendendo como o
to
órgão dele
understand how
trabalha todos
their
os
voice
dias.
organ
Vocês
works
podem
every
fazer
day.
a
You
mesma
can do
coisa,
the
usar
same thing as
algumas
interpreters.
palavras
Use
ou frases que
words or
são do seu
phrases which
idioma
are part
nativo
of your
e
native language,
frases
and
daquilo que você
phrases
vai
and
fazer na
words of the
tradução. Com isso, você
your other
consegue
language.
entender como
Thereby,
já
you're
está o
able to
seu
understand
parâmetro
your
inicial.
initial parameter, your
Depois, você tem
baseline. Then
como a
you,
Glaucia falou, com
like
algumas
Glaucia said,
práticas de
you use some
aquecimento.
warm-up
Esse
tactics.
aquecimento ele serve não
This
só para
warm-up
preparar o teu
serves to
órgão
prepare
para a
your
dicção,
voice
mas
organ,
também te trazer para o
also
centro,
to
te dar uma pausa para você,
center
olha, eu
you,
vou
to
trocar,
focus you. I'm
vai
going to
deixar de ser
switch.
o
It's
Luciano
no longer going to be
pessoa para ser o
Luciano as a
Luciano
person. I'm going to
tradutor
be Luciano
intérprete.
as an
E
interpreter.
depois,
Now,
quando
after
acabar o
which,
seu
when
turno, a
you
mesma
finish
coisa.
your shift,
Seria
the
um
same thing.
desaquecimento.
You do
Trazer
another
aquela voz que você
warm up,
utiliza para a
posterior warm up,
tradução para o
the
ambiente
switch from
pessoal.
the interpreter voice
Eu acho que
to
essas são
normal
medidas
voice.
muito
These
importantes.
are important
Conhecer
measures
o seu
to
órgão,
know
ou
your
seja, por
voice organ.
dentro.
In other words,
Então, aonde
within,
você estiver,
inside,
ter
wherever
acesso a
you
um
are, and
otorrino,
have
ter
access to an
acesso a uma boa fonoaudióloga para
otorhinolaryngologist with a good
entender
speech
como está
therapist to
não
understand
só
the situation,
a
not only
estrutura, mas a
of the
parte
structure,
da
but the
produção
production,
articular, se você articula
articulating.
bem,
If you
se
articulate
você
the words
pode
properly, if you
melhorar o teu
can
desempenho.
improve
Como a
your
Glaucia falou, é
performance,
uma
as Glaucia said,
commodity, e
it's a
como commodity eu
commodity, and
também
as a
posso investir
commodity, you
nisso.
can invest
Então,
in
todos
that
os
commodity. So
grandes oradores que
all
nós temos,
great
vamos
speakers that
falar
we
de língua
have, or
inglesa. Os
orators, let's
dois
talk
mais
about English
famosos do
language. The
século
most
passado
famous
eram
ones of the past
Kennedy e
century were
Obama.
Kennedy
Os
and
dois
Obama.
passaram por um
Both of them
aprendizado, eles não
learned learned to speak. They weren't born speakers. It's a learning process to listen. It's a learning process to speak. And the pauses were well calculated by Kennedy and Obama. That's what's important. The problem is that when we have, for example, when a poor speaker, in the sense that they are poor communicators, they speak too fast, or they don't pronounce the words properly, or they may have speak whispering, like we say, speak inwardly, or they have bad habits in his own language. And for you, it's a very complicated situation where sometimes improvisation leads to stress in communication. So at this moment, my tip is, if possible, for the breaks between the translators, if possible, if they were longer, it would be better. I believe over the course of a Congress, let's talk about a Congress in Otorhinolaryngology where you are translating, you can realize who are the good speakers and who are the bad speakers. The bad speakers, you kind of prepared for them. So you develop over time this kind of expertise in understanding this process of translation and interpretation, the speakers that can collaborate with you or not.
Posso só
That's
complementar com uma
excellent.
coisa
Could
que
I
eu
add something
esqueci?
to that I forgot
Eu
before? Okay.
sempre
I always
valorizo muito a questão de
value
voz
and
enquanto
appreciate
saúde.
voice as
E a
health, right?
voz como
Okay, and
saúde,
voice
né, não
as
é só a
health
qualidade, se a
is not
voz é
just a
bonita, se não é
quality if the
bonita, mas
voice is
assim, o quanto
beautiful or
isso me
not, but
cansa, o quanto isso me
this
estressa, o quanto
tires me, it
isso me
stresses
afasta
me,
das
it strains
pessoas.
me,
E
and it
quanto melhor está o meu estado
creates a
geral de
barrier between
saúde,
and the better
saúde não
my
só da voz,
overall
mas do
health
meu
is, not
corpo,
only my
melhor vai
voice
estar a
health
minha
and my
voz, porque
bodily
ela
health
faz
is
parte de um
better
todo. Não, a
is my
gente não pode
voice. So
achar que
it's
é uma
part.
laringe que
We
sai
can't think
andando.
that the
Uma
larynx
laringe
is going
faz
to walk
parte da
away.
pessoa,
A
e
larynx is part
quanto
of a
melhor
person,
ela
right?
está,
And the better the
melhor
larynx,
essa voz vai
the
sair.
better
E tem
the better the
um
health
fator
in general, the
importante
better
que a
the
gente não
larynx will
falou,
be. An
Luciano, e
important
eu
factor
que
that we
eu tenho
didn't talk
certeza
about
que ele vai
that I'm certain that
concordar comigo, que é a
Luciano would agree
questão
with me
do
is the
refluxo.
issue of reflux.
Então, o que que tem na
So
questão do
what
refluxo?
about
O
the issue of
refluxo,
reflux?
muitas vezes,
Reflux,
ele é,
oftentimes it
assim, você
is
comeu, imediatamente você
you
está tendo
ate and
refluxo.
you
Você
have
comeu, foi
reflux
para a
immediately.
cabine, foi
You
falar e
had a
está com
meal and you went
refluxo.
into the booth and you have
Essa
reflux in the
também
booth.
pode ser
So
uma
this can
outra
also be
orientação.
another
Eu vou precisar falar,
orientation.
então
If
eu
you're
vou
going to have
comer
to
coisa mais
speak, I'm going
leve.
to
Eu não vou
take
ficar
a lighter
beliscando
meal. I'm
coisas
not
que
going to
podem me dar
nibble at
refluxo,
things that
que não
can
são tão
produce
saudáveis.
reflux that are
Não
not
que a
that
gente não pode
healthy.
comer
So
saudável, que a gente não pode. Não é isso.
it's not that
Mas
we can't
se eu
eat
vou usar a voz
anything, but if you're going to use
profissionalmente,
your voice
eu
professionally,
cuido para que
you take
aquele
care of your
refluxo
voice
não
for that
apareça na hora
reflux
que
to
eu
not
preciso
appear
dessa
when I
voz.
need my voice, okay?
Né? Tem
So
todas
don't nibble
assim,
just before
leite
going to
faz
the
mal. O
booth.
leite faz
Oh,
mal para
is
algumas
milk
pessoas,
bad?
para outras não
Milk
vai
is bad
fazer.
for some people, for other
Né?
people
Tem
they don't.
coisas que
If
fazem mal.
there's
Ponto.
something that are bad
Cigarro
for your
faz
health,
mal,
if you're
bebida alcoólica faz
lactose
mal. Não quer
intolerant,
dizer que a gente não
cigarettes are
pode
bad,
beber, pode
alcohol are
mas
bad.
não vai
It's not
beber
that you
no dia
can't
que você vai
drink, but you got to
falar.
drink the same
Né?
day that you got
Ah,
to
chocolate
interpret,
faz
right?
mal.
Is chocolate
Depende, tem
bad?
pessoas que
It
não sentem
depends. There are
nada,
people
mas
who
o
don't feel
ditado não
anything
pode
with
aumentar o
chocolate, but it
pigarro.
and
A hora
can
que eu aumento o
increase
pigarro,
your
eu posso
uh,
machucar minhas pregas
phlegm.
vocais, né? Minha
It
corda vocal.
strains
Ai,
your
mas então já
vocal
sei, eu
folds.
vou
But
comer,
I'm going
eu
to
vou
begin.
fazer
I'm
tudo
going to
errado,
eat. I'm
eu
going to
vou
do
comer uma
everything wrong.
feijoada,
I'm
vou
going to
entrar na
eat a
cabine, vou
feijoada,
falar
a
alto, não me
heavy meat. I'm
preparei.
going to
Ah,
speak
não, mas eu vou
loud.
comer
I
uma
didn't prepare. But if
maçãzinha
I'm going to
antes que vai resolver
eat
o
an
problema.
apple,
Não,
that'd
não
be
vai
fine.
resolver o
Okay, it's not
problema.
going to solve your
Né?
problem.
Então, a
Just eating
maçã,
an
ela
apple.
ajuda?
So the
Ela ajuda,
apple
mas ela não é
helps you. It helps
remédio.
you, but it's
Ela
not
não
a
vai salvar
medicine. It's
aquilo.
not a
E aí você
drug.
diz
It's
algo
not
para a
going to
pessoa, fala,
save
mas
your
eu comi
voice.
uma maçã
People
ali, ó,
say,
só que eu não tô
but I ate
preparada. Eu falei,
an
ah,
apple,
tá,
so I'm
entendi.
prepared.
Não
Okay,
vai
right.
preparar.
It's not
É,
going to prepare you
a
to
maçã, por que que ela,
interpret
tanto a gente
apples.
fala que ela
Why do so
melhora a
many people
voz?
that apples
Ela
improve your
melhora
voice?
o quê?
It
A
improves
mastigação da
you're
maçã,
chewing the
ela vai
apple.
fazer com que a
It
gente relaxe todas
leads
essas
us to
estruturas aqui
relax
de
all the
cima, vai
muscles,
engolir mais
and
vezes.
you're
Na
going to
hora que eu
swallow
engolo,
more
também
often.
relaxa a
When
minha
you swallow,
laringe.
you
Ela tem um
relax
efeito
your larynx.
adstringente,
It
que ela
has
vai
a adstringent effect
diminuir a
that
questão
it
da produção do
decreases
pigarro, mas ela
the
não
phlegm,
cura nada.
but it doesn't
Ela
cure
vai
anything. An apple, it
facilitar em alguns
facilitates
momentos.
at
Então a gente
some
precisa
moments
de
specifically.
outras
So we need
coisas
other
que não
things
só
as well, which
comer a maçã.
other than just eating an apple. It's not a silver bullet
Muito
in
bem
that
lembrado,
sense.
Glaucio.
That's
Por
great,
favor.
Glaucia. Okay,
Não, eu concordo plenamente
I
com a
agree
Glaucia.
lock,
E
stock, and barrel with
e acho que
Glaucia.
uma situação
And I think
importante que
it's
me
an
vem à
important
mente é
situation
quando
that comes to
vocês
mind that
viajam
when
a
you travel
trabalho para países
on
que é
work
uma
assignments
alimentação
to
que vocês
countries
não
where it's
dominam
kind of
e
food
são
that you aren't
oferecidos aqueles
familiar with
alimentos,
and
lembrar
you
isso
are offered that kind
deve-se
of
levar
food,
em
you should remember
consideração.
that you should
Às
take it
vezes
into
um alimento
consideration.
ali que está um
Sometimes
pouco mais
if it's
picante,
some more
um pouco mais
spicier
elementos que vocês
or
não estão acostumados,
food that
então
you're not
pode
used to can
causar
affect
surpresas.
your
Então é
voice
interessante
and
isso.
give you a bad surprise,
Vai fazer
okay?
uma tradução por
If you're going to
mais
do
tempo,
interpretation
tente
longer,
antes fazer
try
uma alimentação
before
mais
to
leve,
have a
se estiver indo
lighter
a outro
meal.
país,
And if you're in a different
confie em
country,
alimentos que você conheça
you
e
should
líquidos
trust
também.
in food that you're familiar with, and liquid as well.
É interessante isso, não?
That's
Porque tem
fascinating, Dr.
tudo
Luciano.
relacionado
It all
exatamente ao fato
related precisely
do
to the
que
fact
foi dito,
what
de que
it
cada
was
vai ter a sua
mentioned before,
voz,
that
cada vai ter a
people
sua
have their own
característica,
voices
e ao
and their own
mesmo tempo a gente tem que
characteristics, and at the same
conhecer
time we
o
have to
nosso
acknowledge
sistema.
and know our
Né?
own system,
É
right?
muito individual,
It's
para um faz bem
individual.
chocolate, para outro não faz,
Chocolate
um
is
ama
good for
maçã,
some
o outro
people,
ama
not for
café,
others.
e a
Apples are
gente
good for
precisa ter
some, not for
esse
others. And we need to
basal,
have
não é?
this
Que é essa ideia do todo
baseline
dia fazer o
idea that
registro, é
every
conhecer
day to
o seu basal
record and
e
know your
poder atuar
baseline and
sobre
to be able
eles.
to
Porque
act
tem
on the
dias que a gente
baseline.
acorda e fala,
There's some days that we
o
wake up and
anjo
said,
não vai,
okay,
né? E é isso, a gente tem que
I'm
conhecer
not
e
up
ter
for
as
interpreting today.
estratégias
And we have to
e
have
poder,
strategies to
obviamente,
deal with that
contar
and
com
be able to
profissionais para nos ajudar a
rely on
desenvolver o
professionals
que é
to help
aquele
us to develop what
aquele
is
meu
my
kit, né?
kit,
O
my
meu
basic
kit
kit,
de resgate
my
antes que a
rescue
coisa
kit
fique
before
fora do controle.
things get
Porque
out of
nós estamos
control.
falando aqui
We're talking
de
here
uso
about
do
the
dia a
use
dia, do que
on a
fazer,
daily
mas
basis
às
of what to
vezes
do,
as
but
coisas dão
sometimes
errado,
things
né?
go wrong, okay? It's
Vários
human.
colegas
There's several different
perdem a voz,
colleagues,
não só os colegas, várias pessoas
not just
perdem
colleagues,
voz,
but people
outros
lose
não,
their voice. Other
né?
people
Eu,
don't,
por
okay?
exemplo,
I,
a
for
voz não
example,
é um órgão de
my
choque.
voice
Outras
is not a
coisas são,
shock
mas
organ.
não é a minha
I have other
voz, né?
shock organs, not my voice, right?
Mas para um intérprete,
But for an
obviamente,
interpreter,
perder a
obvious
voz
to lose
por
your
um
voice
resfriado ou
because
por
of a
uma situação de
cold
estresse ou o que
or
for, ou
stress or
desenvolver
whatever,
também o
or
problema,
you can also
é uma
develop a
coisa
more
séria.
serious
Então vamos
problem.
tentar
It's a
falar um
serious
pouco
issue.
disso,
So let's talk a
se
little bit
tudo
about
mais
this.
der errado,
If
não?
everything goes wrong,
Quais são as
okay,
patologias
what
que a
are
gente pode
the
ver como mais
disorders that we
comuns ou
can see
prevalentes
that are more
entre um
common or
usuário
prevalent
profissional de
among
voz e o que
professional
fazer? Tem
voice
solução?
users?
Tem
And are there
resgate ou
solutions?
precisa
Can
mudar de
you
profissão? Talvez a gente
rescue
tenha
the
que mudar de
situation, or
profissão
do you have to
independente
change your
da voz,
profession? Some
mas por
people have to change
enquanto
their
tem lugar para a
profession
gente, tá?
regardless of their voice.
Vamos lá.
So far we're doing okay with our voice, okay? So
Então
let's
vamos lá.
address that issue.
Partindo
Okay,
daquele,
fine.
posso começar, Glaucia?
Can I start,
Claro.
Glaucia? Yes, of
Partindo
course.
daquele pressuposto que
With
você
the assumption that
acordou no
you
dia de
woke up
manhã, vai
one
fazer a
fine
sua tradução
morning,
e você
you're going
testou a
to
sua voz e
interpret
viu
that
que
day, and you
não
tested your
está
voice,
bem,
and you see that your voice
não
is
é? Então,
not
assim, começou
well.
a acender
So
ali
there
uma
was a
luz
red
amarela. O
flag
que eu
right
vou
there.
fazer?
Or what
Tudo
am I
isso,
going to do?
lógico, se você
Of course,
conseguir se
logically, if you are
antecipar,
able to
tudo
take
fica
a
mais
step
fácil,
ahead
que
of
é o que nós
the
fazemos
situation,
ao
it
longo do
becomes easy.
tempo
That's
com
what we
muitos
do
cantores
over
que
time
eu
with a lot of
atendo e a Glaucia
singers
também.
that I
Ou
work
seja,
with in
existe
Glaucia
o plano
as
A,
well.
existe o
There's
plano
a
B e o
plan
plano
A
C.
and
O que é
B and
possível
C
com o
plan.
passar do
What is
tempo,
possible
conhecendo
over
cada
time, knowing
profissão,
each
nós
profession,
conseguimos
we are able to
desenvolver esses planos A, B ou
develop
C.
to develop
Então,
plans A, B, and C.
então isso faz
So
com que o
all of
próprio
this means that
tradutor fique um
the
pouco mais
translator or
tranquilo.
interpreter is
Algumas mensagens que são muito
calmer.
importantes.
Some messages are
Nenhum
very important. There's
tradutor,
an
nenhum
interpreter, no
médico, nenhum
translator, no
fonoaudiólogo vai
physician, no
trabalhar
speech therapist is going to work
100%.
100% of the time.
Então é
Okay,
importante que
it's
vocês
important
tenham em
that to
mente
keep in
que
mind
essa
that there's
autoexigência
this
só prejudica alguns
high
ouvidos. Então é importante
self-demand
eu
harms
desenvolver
you. It's important
algo
to
do
develop
tipo, se
something
minha
like, okay,
voz,
if my voice,
para eu exercer
for
minha
me
profissão, eu
to
preciso
exercise my
muito mais
profession, I
ter
need
uma
more
qualidade,
quality,
clareza,
clarity in my
então eu
voice.
tenho que
So
privilegiar
you have to
essas,
prioritize
esses fenômenos do que
these
alguns
phenomena
outros.
rather than
Então, às
other
vezes, a
phenomena.
clareza
So
precisa ser
sometimes clarity,
emitida, então eu
you have to
invisto na
emit
clareza, eu
clarity, you
faço
invest in
estudos para
clarity, you
clareza,
do
estudos
studies for
para
clarity,
melhorar
studies
a minha
to improve
articulação.
my
Agora,
vocal
quando ela
articulation.
começa a
But when
falhar, por
that begins
exemplo,
to
eu tenho que
fail, for
detectar, é
example,
um
you have to detect,
resfriado,
is it a cold?
é uma possibilidade de refluxo,
Is
a
a
minha voz
reflux?
sumiu por
Or my
completo.
voice disappeared
Então,
completely?
é lógico, é
Okay,
muito difícil
of
aqui eu
course, it's difficult
generalizar qualquer
to
uma dessas
generalize
situações,
any
mas
of these
sem sombra de
situations, but
dúvidas, a
without
mais
a
comum
shadow of a
é
doubt, the most
eu
common
fiquei
thing is
ou
that I
resfriado
either have a cold
ou eu tive
or
um
I
processo alérgico. Quer
had an
seja porque
allergy, whether
eu entrei no hotel que
I
estava
entered the
empoeirado,
hotel, which
a
was full
cabine
of
estava
dust, the
suja
booth
ou
was
eu
dirty,
peguei um
or
resfriado.
I
Nesse
caught a cold.
momento,
Okay,
vocês
at this
precisam ali
moment, you
identificar
need
se
to
é
identify,
possível
if
prosseguir
possible,
nessa
to
tradução ou não.
proceed with
E
the
isso é
interpretation or
algo que
not.
precisa ser
You have
desenvolvido
to
por cada
decide. You have
um.
to develop
Lógico,
this
eu como
individually. Of course,
médico e a
as a
Glaucia como
physician and
fonoaudióloga
Glaucia as a speech therapist,
conseguimos
we have
ajudar com o
succeeded in
tempo. Então,
helping
na
over
maioria
time.
das vezes,
So
nenhum
in most cases,
tradutor nos
no
procura
interpreter came to us
antecipadamente. Olha,
ahead
Luciano,
of time.
eu estou
Okay,
começando a
Luciano, I'm
traduzir
starting to interpret
e minha
today,
carreira está indo muito
and
bem. Eu queria
my
fazer um
career is doing
preparo.
fine. I
O
would
que
like
você
to
acha?
prepare my
Aí
voice.
eu
What do
vou
you think?
examinar o
So
órgão,
I
eu vou
examine
saber
their
como ele é,
vocal
quais são
folds
as
and check them out,
limitações,
the
vantagens,
limitations,
desvantagens,
the advantages
encaminho
and
para a Glaucia, a
disadvantages,
Glaucia
and I
faz uma
refer
boa
them to
avaliação,
Glaucia. She does a
entende
good
quais são
speech
os pontos
therapist to work up.
positivos e negativos,
We
iniciamos
understand
o
the
trabalho.
positive, the
Seria
strengths and
ótimo, né,
weaknesses,
Glaucia?
and we begin the work.
Mas,
That would be great.
infelizmente,
But
isso não
unfortunately,
acontece.
it doesn't
Então,
happen
o
like
que
that in
acontece é que
reality. training. So what happens that, and many of the interpreters that I know, and Glaucya knows
que
as
nós
well,
conseguimos fazer
who we're
trabalho para o
able to
futuro
do
é
work for the
porque
future
tiveram
with them, it's
problema no
because they've
passado.
had problems in the past,
Então, o que
right?
trouxe
So
vocês a nós não é o
what brought
amor, é
you
a
to us
dor.
is not love, it's
Então,
pain,
é
okay?
muito
So
difícil
it's very
manejar
rare
essa
to
dor
and
na
hard to
situação
manage that
aguda.
pain
Então,
in an
o
acute
que nós
situation. So
costumamos
what we
recomendar
normally
é,
recommend
ao
is
você testar
when
sua
you
voz,
test your voice
percebeu que
and you
alguma
realize
coisa
that
está
something is
falhando, pense em
failing,
plano A, B ou
think of
C. Quando você
plan
vê
A,
plano
B,
A,
and C. What would
eu
be plan
consigo
A?
fazer
You're
essa
able to
tradução
do
do
the
jeito que eu
interpretation
estou?
as I am. Can I? That's the question. If yes, proceed. I cannot. Sometimes I have a coworker, a colleague, and I say to my colleague, I'm not well. Can you substitute, replace me for me to go to speech therapist by phone or online or talk to an otolaryngologist? The plan C would be, I'm not able to work, to suspend activity, interrupted. Sometimes this is abrupt, however, sometimes it's necessary. Okay, we've had some situations with singers, for example, with dubbers and entertainers who didn't realize they were in such dire straits, and they sang or dubbed nevertheless, and the injury was worse than if they had not worked. Of course, it's a decision which involves several different issues. It's not just a medical issue, there's a social issue, and there's a financial issue as well. Sometimes it's your only interpreter. They have to do the interpretation, but I think that, and you develop plans A, B, and C, and also to have this perception and realization is important. I don't know if you have this in contract form. These are the things that the world is still little known to me. For example, since it's a human activity, a person can have a cold and they can lose their voice. There's a kind of protection, legal protection. Is there kind of legal protection for you at this moment? Because if you have a cold, you called me and said, okay, Cecilia, I can't work. I'm going to give you a doctor's excuse. It's a world that we still have to take care of issuing opinions, because we're talking about each country has its own legislation, for example, in contracts and linguistic issues, and also social issues and cultural issues, right? If I could just answer that concerning the legal safeguards for most interpreters in Europe works for international agencies. So these are work contracts with legal safeguards and longer term contracts. So most of us here are freelancers. We have one-off contracts. There's a clause. If for some reason I'm unable to work that day, on that day, I will be replaced and find a replacement for some that is equally qualified. We have a contact network of our colleagues who are very reliable. Everybody has helped anybody. It's not just losing your voice. Sometimes we have other problems, a family problem, an unexpected illness or whatever. So this would be our backup. That's how we deal with the client. I can't go on that day, but I'm going to send an equally qualified colleague. Sometimes the person rushes to the rescue, and that protects the person that's not going to be able to work, and they're able to work anyway. Okay?
Assim, concordo plenamente com o que o Luciano falou, e foi
I
bom você
fully
ter
agree
dito isso,
with
porque a gente
Luciano,
fica
and
até
it was
mais
great that
tranquilo
you
quando
said
precisar
this.
dizer assim, olha, é melhor você não
And because
vir,
then we feel
né?
better when we say, okay, better
Tem
you
alguns momentos
replace
que
me
tem
now.
algumas profissões
There's
que a gente não pode
some
dizer, é melhor
professions where
você não ir, porque não tem
there's
quem
some
vá.
professions where you
Lá
just
no
can't do that.
teatro
You can't walk
municipal,
away. You
cantando
can't find a
uma
replacement.
ópera, um solo que a pessoa ensaiou
On an
3 anos para
opera, a
falar.
solo
Então,
performance,
são
you can't
situações
just
um
say,
pouco
oh,
mais
I'll find a
delicadas.
replacement, and it's a lot more of
Eu trouxe
it's a lot more
algumas
complicated.
imagens só para vocês.
I have a few
Talvez as pessoas não saibam o que
images
significa cada uma das lesões ou dos
to
diagnósticos que
show some of the
recebem,
different
mas é só a título de curiosidade mesmo. O que
diagnoses
eu
that we can
penso
have,
ser
or some of
importante
the
é que
problems that we can
normalmente
have with our
chega
voice
pra
and vocal
gente, como são
apparatus.
profissionais da voz,
As
o
vocal
que mais aparece
professionals
são disfonias comportamentais que a gente
are
entende. O que
behavioral
significa isso?
dysphonias. And what does that
Disfonias,
mean?
problemas de voz que
These are
normalmente
vocal
acontecem por
problems that
comportamento
happen
vocal inadequado.
generally because of
Esse comportamento
improper
vocal inadequado
behavior.
pode ser falar muito, pode ser falar alto,
Maybe
pode ser assim,
speaking too
eu
much,
uso
speaking too
muito a voz
loudly,
enquanto eu interpreto, traduzo, mas eu também uso
using
a
a
voz
lot of
porque assim,
using
eu
my voice all
tenho
the
eu
time,
tenho
not just when
bebê,
I
eu tenho um filho
work, but
pequeno, faço isso.
outside
Então,
because
assim,
I sing in the
tem
church. I've
um
got
uso de
little
voz que
kids,
é
etc.
não só profissional,
So
mas
we
é
use our
uma
voice
voz que é da
outside the
vida.
or professional context, and we use it
E às vezes o
in our
nosso
everyday
trabalho
life.
ali é tentar
And
minimizar
often
onde eu posso
in our
segurar a voz,
work,
onde eu não posso.
we
Eu
have to stop
sempre
and think, where
associo
can I
com os
hold back?
atletas, né?
Where
Se a
can I
gente pegar,
speak
por
less?
exemplo, um
And I say
profissional
this
vai
like
começar a
to
correr.
athletes.
Normalmente a pessoa
If you
quando fala
talk
vai
to an
começar a
athlete
correr, sai
and a
correndo,
person
não vai
says,
ficar
I'm going to
machucado.
start running, and they
É o
start
ciclo.
running
Então
until
assim,
they get hurt,
não são só as pessoas
right?
que usam a voz. Começam a fazer
No,
alguma coisa,
it-
machuca, aí vai
it's
procurar um
it's not like
profissional,
the
daí vai
just
ter
like
uma
the voice. And
fisioterapia, daí
but when you
é
start running, if you
difícil
have a
porque a
problem, you
gente
go
não
to a
tem essa
physical therapist,
cultura
etc. And
de
it's the same
discussão e
thing with our
oferecer apoio de
voice.
saúde, né? De fazer um trabalho preventivo. Então,
We often, though, fail to do preventive work and to take care of it before it gets hurt. So if you have an understanding of the idea that something is slightly off, I can't wait. I can't just sit around waiting for it to get worse. If you have that kind of understanding, you'll be doing yourself a great service. So often in these cases, it requires a lot of vocal rehab, voice work. And these vocal specialists can help with these very acute problems. So if you have an allergy, or a doctor can help you with this, right? If you've got an allergy or if you're sick, whatever, you can get a quick medicine, okay? Medicine right off. That's the right, immediately something you can use to help. But what you need to do is some sort of behavioral change so that this doesn't happen over and over again. I'm going to go through some of the primary pathologies that we see with the voice. One of the things we see here is that people show up a lot with gaps, glottic gaps, right? You need to close your vocal folds, right? This is what you need to do. This is what it looks like when it's healthy. They need to close. What happens is that the folds don't always close. When those folds don't close, it means that air is escaping. And that means there's a lot of effort that I'm putting into holding that air back in, and I'm tiring out my voice. There's a lot of effort, there's a lot of force that I'm using, and this leads to greater tension in the larynx, which can lead to a really high-pitched voice or a really deep voice. And then leads to more tension, that leads to higher pitched voices, and so on and so forth. And there are a number of different types of gaps. Each of these gaps is slightly different, and each of them has their own traits or characteristics. So if someone says, okay, I've got a gap, we know that it means that the vocal folds are not closing, but the question about how we resolve that depends on understanding what is behind it. Often there's improper behavior, too much force. This leads to exhaustion, and this is usually what's causing it. Sometimes there's vocal alteration. There's no problem with our system whatsoever. A number of things could be causing this. It looks fine when you look at the larynx. The larynx is fine. We don't see a physical injury in the larynx, but something else might be wrong. So okay, so we see there's an injury. Here we have a beautiful, beautiful vocal folds. There's nothing on it. Here we've got vocal nodules. This is something that develops over life. It often happens in women's larynxes or children's larynxes, or people with the same size of a larynx as a child. Now, this doesn't mean that this doesn't happen in adults and men, etc., but it happens more in those who have the size of a larynx that corresponds to a woman or to a child. Nodules can be addressed with physical therapy, and then they're reabsorbed back into the larynx. Polyps can be addressed either with physical therapy, but not always, and sometimes there is surgery. Here we have a someone who works professionally with her voice. She did therapy, and she underwent therapy, and after 4 or 6 months, the body was able to absorb it. The one on the bottom was actually much more difficult. This required medical intervention through medication to address. And all of them were caused by certain vocal behavior. Now, there are some problems that are congenital. Here's a cyst. It looks just like a nodule. Look at how similar it is. Here's the nodule. Going back, cyst. They're very similar. But what's happening here is that this is a congenital injury. They were born with it. Can they not use their voice? Of course they can use their voice. As Luciana said, of course. For some jobs, I need a very clear voice, clean voice, no air pushing through. lyrical singers, opera singers, actors, interpreters, and others can have different types of voices as long as it's healthy and adapted. So what do we do in these cases? We adapt this larynx to these congenital traits. This does not turn into cancer. It does not develop into cancer. You can have a cyst your entire life and make adjustments and adaptations so that you can use your voice professionally. Now, you know that you're going to have to be extra careful, but that's fine. There are professional singers that have been shown to have been born with this congenital defect of a cyst. It's not a problem. It's a characteristic. It's a trait. They were born with it and they need to adjust, adapt, or live with it. And that is fine. Here's another injury. This is an injury that comes from smokers. Up on the top right is what your vocal folds should look like. And on the bottom, you see this swollen vocal fold, and that's why you hear deep voices. Because it's a higher pitched voice, it should be a higher pitched voice, and this is what you get, right? That's why you get that rough, hoarse voice, harsh voice. These are people who have smoked for years on end, and there's no way to address it. You most likely need surgery to improve the voice. And then finally, we have acid reflux. This is the result of acid reflux. This acid keeps coming up and burns this region, burns the vocal folds. It's a little more subtle, visually speaking, but it heavily impacts the voice and vocal quality. So there are a number of injuries and pathologies that can affect the voice and vocal apparatus that can be addressed through physical therapy, that can be addressed through medication, or that don't need to be addressed at all. And again, sometimes people are born with injuries that nobody ever notices until much later when there's a later manifestation because there's heavy use or extra use of the voice. I just want to show the subtle differences you can see in pathologies. This is a colleague of yours, an interpreter, who got sick. They needed to travel. They thought it was just a cold, a common cold, but the voice wasn't getting any better. They went to a doctor. Yeah, they went to a doctor in a foreign country, and it said, no, it's just a cold, no big deal. They continued to work. I don't know how long they worked all day. They worked all day. They spoke extensively, came back to Brazil after this job, went on the train, came to Brazil, and they had obviously gotten a very hoarse voice, and they realized it was hard for them to get their voice back. So that's when I saw this person, and Luciano saw this person. This is our patient. You can hear the air escaping. You can hear how rough it is, how hoarse it is. And if this patient had continued as such, it would have been chronic and it would have obviously affected their career.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Where do we hear this? In the 1, 2, what are we hearing with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? Something's off. I'm just going to play it again. Just pay attention.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
You can see that certain sounds are very hoarse. 4, 10. Luciano gave this person medicine, and then they had 10 therapy sessions. And this is the voice after 10 sessions and after medication. And they've never had problems ever since. And why? Probably because that person was able to figure out how to deal with the voice they had. They now know what they can do, what they can't do, how they should act, how they shouldn't act. That person is now paying much more attention. She's paying much more attention to her voice. She's focused more.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
So if you listen to the before and after, you can really see how much better the voice got. And I brought this as an example because this could happen to any of you. It wasn't vocal behavior. it was, she got sick. Anyone can get sick. We're all subject to that. Anyone can get sick or can get reflux or some sort of gastric issue. Some people get sick and their vocal folds just freeze up. And it's not because you're a vocal professional. It's not because you work with your voices. It happens to anyone. Obviously, there's a higher chance it'll happen to you because you work with your voice. But the truth of the matter is anyone in this world can have these issues or can face these problems. I love this. And I think what you just said is absolutely critical. It's statistically speaking, since you all speak extensively and use your voice professionally, the likelihood is higher for you of getting one of these pathologies, but everyone could potentially develop this. It's statistically, everyone is subject to this. No, but of course, soccer players, the impact is lower if they lose their voice, right? A volleyball player needs to be worried about their hands. But vocal professionals, since you work with your voices, it is your instrument and you work with it on a day-to-day basis, it's much more important. And that is why we're here today to raise awareness and understand that there are elements that I can control and others that I cannot. For example, what about interpreters? When you come and work with interpreters, are they facing some sort of viral infection? Are they just sick? Do they have laryngitis or something? Is this something that happened just once, or is there some sort of problem with a longer-term problem? Do they have asthma? Their lungs aren't working properly. Something that could affect vocal folds. We need to. It can force their throat to work more because, and they tire out faster because this is something that is more chronic. Perhaps they have functional dysphonia. Maybe because they're working too much. Maybe because they're not listening to themselves, they don't hear the issues. Maybe the speaker's talking really quickly and they don't understand and they're stressed out. All of these perceptions are important for us to understand ourselves and specifically and individually determine possible solutions and the best treatment for that situation.
A gente está
Wow, great.
chegando assim perto do nosso final e algumas perguntas novas
We're
foram
almost
encaminhadas,
drawing to a
mas
close. We
antes
have a
disso
few
tem
new
uma
questions,
última que eu quero
but
fazer,
before
mas
I
para
get
a
to
gente
those questions, I
encerrar
have one
isso, uma
last
pessoa
one.
perguntou se
Someone asked,
exame de voz, fazer uma avaliação de
doing
otorrino, de fono,
voice
é como de um
assessments with
pedreiro,
an
que a gente tem
ENT.
que ir fazer todo
We need an
ano. Ou
audiometry, which we
talvez
should
fazer
technically
uma
do
primeira
on a yearly
vez,
basis,
criar uma
or
basal
perhaps
e aí
once
trabalhar
get a
ela. Qual que é
baseline and then
a
work with
sugestão
that. So what's your suggestion on what we should do to take care of our voices? What tests? I think everyone should do a larynx exam. And you don't need to do it on a yearly basis. If there's some need, do it. However, when someone is sick or whatever, and we do the exam, there's no way to compare it to the baseline. This may be a voice that already has some sort of injury or problem. We won't be able to have a comparison. So what I always say is if at all possible, get these exams done when you're well, when you're fine, not when you're sick. Because that is your baseline. Because then if I'm sick or if I have a problem, I have a basis for comparison. This is not something we do annually. This is not something we do on a regular basis. Our vocal assessment is different. I think we need to do this again. What's the behavior of my voice? What are the positive points? Where do I need to improve? Where do I need to invest to develop my voice better? Luciano talked about speakers. They develop communication skills, and I can develop my vocal skills the same way. Now that can be done informally. I learn how to develop my voice just by living day to day, or or I can do specific exercises and develop my voice and do more formal training for my voice. Is this mandatory? Of course it's not. But if there's an opportunity to do so, I think it's a great opportunity to do a basic assessment of your voice and your larynx, because these are the tools you use for your job. I couldn't agree more. Understanding the instrument that you use to work and understanding them in normal situation when you're not sick is ideal. You then use that as a baseline, whether it's for speech language with a pathologist or for a voice specialist. And I think that's absolutely critical. If I worked with my voice, this is exactly what just like as a doctor, I had to develop other skills specific to my profession. And I think it's the best way that we can, it's an excellent tool that we can have to improve our skills in our profession. Now, specialists will help you develop these skills faster and better.
Tem último ponto e que foram mais de uma pessoa perguntou sobre isso.
A number of people asked similar questions.
Conforme os anos passam, a visão piora, a audição piora,
as
a musculatura
the years
fica pouco
go
mais
by,
cansada. E
our
a voz, hein? Existe
hearing gets
tem
worse,
solução?
our vision
A
gets
voz vai
worse.
perder as
What about our
características e
voice?
nunca mais
Our
nós vamos
voice starts
conseguir
to
receber
lose
elas
its
de volta
characteristics,
e
right? We have
encarar o
there's
público
such a thing
atrás
as
dos fones.
presbyphonia. What happens? At what point should we stop working? Is there any way to slow this down? Yes, time is an issue. Our voice changes over time as we get older. So if you call me back 30 years from now to talk to you for World Voice Day in 2050 something or other, my hair's not going to be the same, my face is not going to be the same, but my voice, if I continue to train it, the likelihood of it aging, which is obviously unavoidable, is less. So the voice does age, but it ages less if we train it and exercise it properly. Women during menopause may confront vocal issues. This is due to the hormonal changes during menopause. We ENTs and speech language pathologists can help our female patients during this moment. Obviously, this is something we would expect during menopause. This generally happens when women are between 45 and 55 years old, but there is an andropause. Men do face andropause much later, but voices do age for both men and women. But if you notice that there are issues or problems as you're interpreting, whether it's articulation or performance, quality of your voice, whatever it is, pay attention, because we may think that this is actually just aging, but it actually may be some sort of pathology, some sort of disease or problem that we see as we're speaking. So pay attention. If you notice that you're losing vocal quality, it's tired, it's difficult, take a look, take a close look and try and figure out what is happening. Is there some sort of injury, illness, or is it senescence, which is the same thing as aging, right? That's the medical word for aging. Now, you can do speech language therapy to bring this aging voice back. Now, I may not have the same voice I had when I was 20 years old, but I can have the same voice I had when I was 30, 40 years old. That is possible.
I have little to add. I agree fully with Luciano. I would just like to tell something that with life expectancy increasing, we have more elderly people in the market, right, working in all different professions, okay? And today, I have a huge demand for these people, the elderly people who are not voice professionals, but who do not want their voices to be judged or deemed in a negative light. so they realize they have a voice impairment. Sometimes it's more in their articulation than it is the voice. It's inevitable. The muscles change, the mucosa change, everything changed. As Luciana said, if we use our voice professionally, our professional use of the voice protects against this aging. It delays. If we take, for example, singers, sometimes they're 90 years old and we don't even realize that they're 90 years old because their voice is perfect, right? But a person who is not a voice professional, they actually lose their voice. So I have a few executives even who work with their voice and their speech, their articulatory standards not show because there's age discrimination, ageism. We would like it not to exist, but ageism exists. So people identify that voice as an old voice. They judge people or inferences that sometimes don't make any sense. So these people come to us for that reason. You are voice professionals, you all interpreters, so quote unquote, you're minimally protected at least, but there can be a change in the articulatory pattern. What does that mean? That your voice is more imprecise, and sometimes your voice is more imprecise because we have note in elderly people, they have their upper lip is longer, and even, sometimes it doesn't even cover their upper teeth. That's crazy. Sometimes people are doing dental treatment to increase their teeth a little bit for their teeth to appear because when they smile, they look younger. So this exists. Women are more affected because of menopause and because of hormone replacement. So sometimes, I don't know, they use their beauty change, their voices changes. They use steroids because they want to train. Their voice changes. On Saturday, next Saturday, we're going to have an event also celebrating the World Voice Day with a French physician who studies this issue of women's voice and the change in the various different life stages vis-a-vis hormones and voice. So I can send you the link to you all if you're interested. They're going to be talking specifically about women's voice in various different life stages, and we're going to focus more on menopause, okay? It's a special focus on that. Great, fascinating. I almost know the interpreters who are going to work at that event. I don't want to spill the beans, right? I know that you know them. Okay. I think it's ageism is a reality, right? That affects us, and sometimes at two extremes because young people sometimes experience they're too young for some things, or they're inexperienced, or people discriminate against everybody. That's crazy, right? The world is going crazy. We should not even go there right now. Okay, I think that it was very interesting. We were able to address precisely the points that we had planned in a progressive sense to understand the anatomy in a sequential fashion. I highlighted some main points. First, that we voice professionals who use our voices professionally, we have to know our own voices to create a reference standard. Of course, using professional services helps us to understand more, to know more, and rely on them in emergency situations as well. So I think that this is extremely important. I also thought to myself that, who knows, maybe we could agree on a workshop for voice exercises or voice training, something hands-on or voice-on in that sense. People thought of warm-ups, the exercises for warm-up, what to do, specific things, whispered voices or breathy voices. How can you compensate for such voice problems? It's interesting to reflect on that. Maybe we could have a practical workshop with a lot of things, a few things that people could understand regardless of having voice disorders, and that would be good for common voices and for our daily work. This is a suggestion for a future event, right? Okay, but on my side, I thought it was fascinating. We have, it's 8:55. I said I was going to keep time, but I also want to let you make any final remarks and final messages or take-home messages, after which I'm going to turn it over to Larissa and people from the Bureau for to adjourn the session, okay? So any final remarks?
Glaucya, começa você.
Glaucia, go ahead.
Eu adorei falar com
I
vocês.
loved
Eu acho
talking
ótima
with
essa
you. I
ideia
think
desses
this idea is
exercícios, porque
great,
realmente
these
em uma hora e meia não
exercises,
dá para a gente
because in
abarcar
an
tudo, mas
hour
eu
and a
quero fazer
half we
só um
can't cover
comentário
everything,
em
but I'd just
relação à
like
voz
to make one
sussurrada,
quick comment
que a voz
concerning
sussurrada é
whispered
uma voz que
voices.
realmente pode
It's
causar
a kind
muito
of voice
problema.
that can
Então a minha
cause a lot of
sugestão, já
problems. So my
rapidinho,
suggestion,
é
a
que
quick
fale baixo.
suggestion is
Falar
to speak
baixo,
softly,
é melhor
softly like
do
this.
que
It's
falar
better
sussurrado.
than to
Isso,
whisper.
o dano da voz sussurrada é
The
muito maior,
harm
tá?
from
Então falar em
whispered
fraca
voice is worse.
intensidade,
So
como se eu estivesse
speak
falando bem
softer
baixinho,
as you were
ajuda
speaking
muito. Isso
softly, but
não
not
vai
whisper.
prejudicar a
This is
voz.
not going to harm your voice. To
Então,
speak softly, but not
eu
whisper.
quero deixar como
So I would
recado
like
da
to
gente
leave this as a
considerar essa
take-home
voz
message for
como a
us to
forma que a
consider
gente se
voice
coloca no
as the
mundo.
way that
Então,
we position
de que
ourselves in the
forma
world.
vocês querem,
How do
e
you
eu penso
want,
sempre isso em
and I
relação a mim,
always think of
vocês
this
querem
with
que as
regard to
pessoas
myself,
os
do you want
identifiquem,
people
as
to identify
identifiquem.
you?
E será
How?
que essa
How
voz
do you
está
want people to
compatível
identify
com a
you?
imagem que
Is your
vocês querem
voice
deixar para os
consistent with
outros?
the image that you
É uma
want to leave with
reflexão.
others? This is
Muito
food
obrigada
for
pelo
thought.
convite. Eu
So
fiquei
thank you very
muito,
much for your
muito feliz de
invitation.
estar aqui com
I was
vocês.
thrilled to be here with you all.
Bom, boa noite a todos. Eu queria
Great.
agradecer a
Good evening, everyone. I want to
oportunidade,
thank you for the opportunity,
principalmente porque nós sabemos
especially
que foi
because we
aberto
know
para
that it
várias
was
pessoas
open
do
to
mundo
people from
e
around the
principalmente
world,
que
and
tem a
especially
tradução em espanhol,
with
francês e inglês. Mas eu queria
interpretation
também
Spanish,
dizer
French,
que
and
eu,
English.
como
But
médico,
I, as a
aqui eu falo
physician,
mediquês,
I'm
né? E a
speaking
Glaucia,
medical
como
jargon, and
fonoaudióloga,
Glaucia,
fala o
as a speech
fonoaudiolês.
therapist,
Então, nós
she
é um
speaks
jeito que nós
speech
utilizamos
therapy
para brincar que os
lingo.
nossos
So we
mundos,
joke
eles
that our
são
worlds are
muito diferentes de
very
vocês. E
different
quando há
from
um evento
yours
como
as
esse,
interpreter. With
onde
an
o
event like
médico
this,
pode
where
expor o
physicians
pensamento
can
dele
expound
para
his
um grupo
thinking
específico
to
de
a
tradutores,
specific
que é uma
group of
profissão
interpreters, which is a
digna,
profession
uma profissão que faz um excelente
that
trabalho, mas
is
que pouco nós
worthy
conhecemos
and
essa
distinguished,
os
but we know
detalhes. Eu tive que
little about
estudar um
the
pouquinho, a
inner
Glaucia
details. So I had
também,
to
para
study a
entender
little bit in
como
Glaucia
é
to
que
understand
vocês lidam no
how
dia a
you
dia.
deal
Então,
on a
eu
daily
penso que é
basis.
muito interessante essa
It's
oportunidade no
fascinating,
futuro,
this
talvez
opportunity. In
fazer
the
um
future,
workshop
perhaps, if you have a
onde nós,
workshop,
a partir do momento que nós
invite
já
us to
conheçamos
participate,
como
since we
vocês
already know
trabalham,
more
do
about
jeito
how
que
you
vocês
work and the
trabalham,
way you work.
quais as características, tentar
What are the
montar alguma
characteristics to try
coisa que seja
assemble
muito
something
oportuno
which
e muito
is
útil.
timely and
E muito
useful?
obrigado
That
mais
would be
uma
great.
vez
And thank you
pela
once again
disponibilidade de todos.
for everyone who attended and participated.
Perfeito, muito obrigada.
Perfect,
Eu
perfect.
também, do
Thank
meu
you very
lado,
much.
agradeço muito o
I also
convite,
want
fico
to
muito
thank
feliz de ter
the
estado aqui.
people for the
Espero ter
invitation. I'm happy to have
conduzido
participated. I
de uma
hope I
forma que tenha
led the
sido
session
interessante para todo
in an
mundo e que a
interesting
gente
way for
tenha
everybody
atendido o
and that
nosso
we have
objetivo.
met our
Com
objectives.
vocês, meninas.
So
Obrigada.
take it away, the people from the
Obrigada,
AIIC Brazil
Andréia.
Bureau. Thank you
Muito
very much,
obrigada, doutora
Andrea.
Glaucia,
Thank
doutor
you, Dr.
Luciano.
Glaucia and Dr.
Olha, foi
Luciano. It was
encantador e eu fiquei muito
awesome,
impressionada
and I
com
was
o tamanho da
amazed
minha ignorância
by
a
the
respeito da minha própria
degree of
voz. E eu
my
tenho a
ignorance concerning
certeza
my
que eu não
own
sou a
voice. I'm
única.
certain that I'm not the
Eu
only
sei
one.
que,
I
infelizmente, o
know
nosso
that,
tempo
unfortunately,
está
our time
acabando. Tem
is
muitas
running
perguntas
out.
que
There are a lot
ficaram
of questions that
realmente,
came
né,
in
por
that
serem
we aren't able to
respondidas.
cover this evening, at least.
A gente vai
And
priorizar
we're
a
going to
pontualidade, porque temos
prioritize
colegas
punctuality because we have
intérpretes que são
colleagues, interpreters
voluntários
who are
e, a
volunteers,
propósito, eu
and
gostaria de
I would
chamá-los e
like to
pedir
call
para
them
que
and
eles
to open
gentilmente
them for
abrissem as
them
suas
to open
câmeras
up
para
their
que a gente possa
cameras for us
conhecer
to be able to
os rostos
see
por
them
trás
and
das
see their
vozes.
faces,
Então,
the
eu queria
faces behind the
começar
voices.
pedindo
I want to
para a
begin
Clarice,
asking
do francês, junto com a Eleonora
Clarif with
Barros. Por
French, with
favor, meninas, muito obrigada.
Leonora.
Já ouvi
Thank you very
elogios
much.
aqui,
I've
assim como também
received a lot of praise
elogios
and also
para a
praise
Melissa Mann e o
for Melissa
Christopher
Mann
Patterson
and
do
Christopher
inglês,
Peterson
que
in
também já fiquei
English.
sabendo que brilharam. E,
And I
lógico,
know they were
Estela
brilliant as well. And
Viajete
of
e
course,
Lara Moamar,
Stélia
duas
and
divas, duas
Lyra,
musas do
two
espanhol.
divas in
Muito
Spanish.
obrigada pelo
Thank you
tempo,
very
pela
much indeed for your
energia
time
e
and
pela
energy
voz
and for
maravilhosa
your
de
wonderful
todos
voices,
vocês.
and all
A
of you,
gente
your
vai
dulcet
encerrar
voices. We're going to
e
adjourn now,
agradecendo a presença
and
de
I want to thank
todos
everyone for
e
attending, participating,
deixando
and
essa,
leaving here.
as câmeras de todos. Ótimo, sim,
People,
a
open your
ideia.
video
Não,
cameras,
obrigada, Cissa,
please.
pela
Let's
lembrança.
see
Então
each
vamos lá,
other.
vamos
Thank
para a
you for
foto.
reminding me.
Antes,
Let's take a photograph first,
aproveitando aqui que a gente
taking advantage of the
ainda
fact that we
não
still
passou do horário,
haven't exceeded our time limit.
Vamos ver se a gente tem
Let's
fotógrafos
see
de
if we have
plantão para fazer aí
photographers present
os
to
print
take a
screens,
gallery
por
print
favor.
screens.
Muito
Please.
obrigada, já estou
Thank you
vendo
very much.
muitas
I can
carinhas
see a
sorridentes.
lot of
Quanta
smiley
gente! Olha,
faces.
nós estamos com
So many beautiful
53
people. We have
participantes.
53
Tivemos
participants.
60
We had 60 at
E
the peak,
mantivemos
and
53 até agora.
we
Quer
have
dizer,
53 with this to the
assunto que
end.
realmente
It's a
cativa a
topic
atenção de
that
todo mundo e
captured
merece,
everybody's
né, a nossa
attention and
atenção.
merits
E
our
eu acho,
attention as
André, que
well.
essa sua
I think that,
sugestão,
Andrea, your
não sei não,
suggestion
hein,
of the
mas é só
workshop
marcar a data
sounds
que eu tenho
good. Just
certeza que vai
schedule it,
ter
and I'm
muito
certain
apoio,
that
né?
there's
Eu
going to
fiquei
be a
impressionada porque eu não sabia o
top
que era
forum. I didn't
buzz-laryngology.
know that
Adorei,
what
doutor
was
Luciano, os
laryngeal
órgãos
buzz,
emprestados, né?
the
E
organs that we lend to
eu
others,
sou
or that we lend
dentista
to our voice.
egressa
I'm a
da
dentist. I'm a
profissão,
former
né?
dentist,
Bom, não
and
sei se existe
I don't know
ex-dentista,
if
mas enfim.
a former
E
dentist exists,
falou do
but
sistema,
I am one
né,
anyway. I'm talking about
estomatognático, mastigatório,
the
e adorei saber que
masticatory
ele é,
system.
né,
I'd
tomado
love knowing
emprestado para
that
poder articular
we
a voz.
use our
O
masticatory
foniatra é o
mechanisms
profissional,
for in a
locutar,
special
esse verbo,
speech therapist,
presbifonia, Andréia. Adorei,
presbyphonia.
como eu
I
era
love that.
ignorante.
I was
E
ignorant. I
muito
didn't know that
encantador,
presbyphonia
foi uma honra
exists.
imensa
It was
tê-los
amazing.
aqui conosco
It was
essa
an honor
noite,
to
que tenha
have you
sido
all
só
with
o
us this
primeiro de
evening.
muitos. Eu
I hope
queria
it was the
abrir
first of
para
many. I'd like to open
os
up
demais participantes
for
que
the
estão
other
conosco até
participants who
agora
are with
e para
us
os colegas do
to this
Bureau, se
moment,
vocês
and the
tiverem
people from
algum
the
lembrete,
Bureau,
alguma coisa
if you have
que
any
porventura eu
reminders
tenha me
or take home
esquecido, por
message, something I
favor.
may have forgotten about.
Acho que nada, acho que você cobriu
I think
tudo,
that
Lari. Obrigada.
you've said it
Acho que a
all,
Cécia de Socorro estava
Larissa.
tentando falar.
Cecilia, I think, was
Cécia,
trying
seu
to.
microfone.
Cecilia, okay.
Agora
I'm sorry, I had my microphone turned off. Okay, it's now turned on. Okay, sorry. Okay, first of all, I want to thank our speakers, our brilliant speakers. You were amazing. Our chairperson made everything flow so smoothly. It was all streamlined. Our interpreters, the colleagues here, and everyone who attended. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, but before we adjourn, one last message. Dr. Glaucya and Dr. Luciano, can we leave us your contacts in the chat box, or if you want to open it and speak them out loud? That was the last message, I think.
Eu posso colocar aqui no chat,
I
sim,
can upload my
os meus
contact
contatos.
info
E
in the
se
chat
vocês
box,
quiserem, eu posso
and
colocar o
if you
folder
want,
do
I
evento
can
também aqui no chat.
send a
Não sei se vai
folder
ficar mais fácil, só
in
pra
the
vocês
chat
saberem
box. I don't know if
também.
it'd be easy just to know that
Por favor,
the
gente,
next
interesse.
meeting
Por
for
favor,
World
quero
Voice
ficar-
Day on next
Vou
Saturday.
colocar. E eu preciso
I'm going to
parabenizar a
upload
Andrea,
that.
que
I want to
conduziu de
congratulate
uma
Andrea,
forma tão
who led
fácil
this
pra
session
gente, viu,
so
Andrea? Muito
smoothly.
obrigada.
Andrea, thank you very
Obrigada. Acho
much.
que foi,
Thank you.
seguiu natural. Acho que foi bom,
It
sim.
was all
Conseguimos
natural and
uma boa
smooth.
sintonia. Muito
We were
obrigada.
all in sync, so thank you all.
Muito bem, muito obrigada
Great.
a todos. Doutor Luciano, você
Fantastic.
pode deixar o
Dr.
seu contato
Luciano,
aqui com a
can
gente
you give us
também?
your contact
Com
information
certeza,
here as
deixo aí
well?
no chat.
Yes,
Quero
certainly.
agradecer. E
I'll upload it to the chat
uma
box.
palavra que eu gostaria muito de
One
escutar, como
final
é que
word
seria a
I'd like to
tradução em
hear.
Otorhinolaryngology, é
What about
saudade, né? Uma palavra tão usada no
saudade?
nosso português.
I
Como é que
miss you.
ficaria?
It's
Eu acho
like
que esse evento vai
yearning.
deixar saudades
Saudade. We're going to
e
have
coloca à disposição para
saudade.
futuros
It's
outros. Muito
the
obrigado.
perfect word in Portuguese. Saudade
Com
is
certeza, doutor Luciano. É isso
yearning,
aí. A gente espera,
homesickness.
sim, né, poder matar
We
essas
miss you.
saudades bem
If we
rápido
feel saudade, it's
e a
because we
curiosidade
miss
de
you.
muitos dos
And
colegas, né, com
people
esse
are
assunto.
curious about this
Queridos,
topic. Okay.
acho que é isso. Doutora
Dear
Glaucia, eu vou aguardar
friends and
até
colleagues,
que você termine
Dr.
de colocar seu
Glaucia
contato. Doutor
just
Luciano também
uploaded her
aqui, vai ficar
contact, and Dr.
gravadinho para quem
Luciano,
for
or people
assistir o evento depois.
who are
Aqui
going
a
to
gente já
attend the
viu
next
a voz
event.
da mulher.
We've heard
Sensacional, dia
Women's
25 de abril, está
Voice
pertinho.
on April 25th,
É
actually.
isso,
The next,
queridos. Boa
not
noite a
this
todos.
Saturday, next Saturday. Good
Ótimo
evening,
restinho de
everyone.
semana. Aproveitem
We
o
hope you have a
feriado na semana
wonderful
que vem
rest
para
of this week
descansar
and have a
bastante.
great, the
E
2
cuidem
two
da voz, porque
holidays
realmente
next
ela é um instrumento muito caro para todos nós.
week. And happy
Boa
World
noite.
Voice Day to everyone.